We don't just tell stories. We orchestrate resurrections. We serve second acts more shocking than a boardroom coup, romantic tension sharper than a legal clause, and strategic mind games that'll have you questioning every success story you've ever heard. Welcome to Novella Station. Here, you'll meet Alex Maxim, the Kingmaker, the man who can rebuild your life from the ashes for a king's ransom. But his gift is a curse. He can crown anyone a legend except himself. Chapter 1. The Price of Incompletion. The blue-white light of the phone screen was a merciless thing. It carved the shadows under Alex's eyes and illuminated the headline. Vevrin Dynamics secures $10 million in funding for revolutionary packaging technology. He knew every detail of the revolutionary method. He'd invented it. The carbon polymer lattice was born in the Princeton engineering lab, fueled by his obsession. He'd filed the patent. He'd built the first rough prototype with his own hands. $2 million. That was the price he'd accepted to sell it all to Vevrin 6 months ago. A fortune to a 24-year-old. Now, it felt like the price of his own soul. He had tried. That was the acid burning in his veins. He hadn't been lazy or entitled. After graduation, he poured everything into making it himself. He met with 23 venture capitalists. The pattern was always the same. Ought the science, then a wall of practical questions he couldn't answer. VC partner. The tech is genius, Alex. But where's your manufacturing plan? Your supply chain? This is just a brilliant artifact. It's not a company. Alex, we'll build that. The product is the hard part. VC partner. Sighing, the product is 10% of the hard part. You're a brilliant inventor. But a CEO? This feels unfinished. When Vevrin's buyout offer came, his advisor told him, "You're a wildcatter, son. You can find the oil. Let them build the refinery." He sold it. Now Vevrin, with its teams and systems, the refinery, was being hailed as visionary. His genius had been the seed, but it only flowered in their soil. The ghosts of his past were proof of a cruel pattern. Claire, they dreamed together. His first venture, Maxim Consulting, was his bold, equity-based model. He worked brutally hard for a year, but clients fled his intensity. The business died. Claire took the corpse of his idea, smoothed its edges, and built Stratagem LLC. Within 2 years, it was a multi-million-dollar agency. In her new corner office, she offered him a job. Alex, a job? Claire, this company is our idea from the library cafe. Claire, she opened a drawer, pulled out his old, coffee-stained notebook with the original schematics, and dropped it into her sleek trash bin. You had the idea, Alex. You failed at realizing it. I didn't. That's the difference. You draw the blueprint. I build the house. Marissa, the struggling actress. For a year, he was her coach, her strategist. He rebuilt her confidence, reframed her nerves as potent vulnerability, drilled her until she could command a room. Before her breakthrough audition, he held her shaking hands. Alex, you are not asking for permission. You're offering them a truth they're afraid of. You're unforgettable. Now, go be that. She got the part. She became a star. Then came the text. You taught me how to be a star. But stars don't orbit anyone else. You're not fit to be at my side up here. Elena, the neuroscience PhD who saw the world in data. When her research stalled, he was the one who asked the lateral questions that cracked it open. He was her control variable. When she won the all-consuming Rothschild Fellowship, she met him with the calm of a scientist concluding an experiment. Elena, the fellowship is 24/7 immersion in Switzerland. A long-distance relationship under these conditions is a 92% probability of failure. It's an unacceptable drain on cognitive resources. Alex, Elena, we can. Elena, you were a perfect control, but the experiment is entering a new phase. I have no time to waste on relationships. Each soared, propelled by the clarity, strategy, and belief he had poured into them. Each time, he was left in the dust of their ascent. And through it all, he remembered the old woman. It was at a chaotic street fair during his junior year, a world away from campus logic. Her booth was squeezed between a tarot reader and a knife sharpener. Her eyes, milky at the edges but piercing at the center, locked onto him as he passed. "For you," she said, her voice like dry leaves. "A reading. You need to hear it." He laughed, the confident scoff of an Ivy League man of science. "I need a high GPA and a summer internship. Can you see that in my palm?" She didn't smile. She took his hand, her grip surprisingly strong, her wrinkled fingers tracing his lifeline. She stared for a long, uncomfortable moment. "You are a foundation," she whispered finally. "A what?" "You are made to be built upon. You will give others their strength, their direction, their height. But you," she looked up, and her gaze felt like an X-ray. "You're not complete. Until you become complete, you will never know complete success. You will only ever build houses for other people to live in." He jerked his hand back, a strange chill down his spine. "Yeah, okay. Thanks for the fortune cookie." He tossed a $5 bill on her table and walked away, shaking his head at the mystic mumbo-jumbo. Now, in the dark of his apartment, the memory wasn't funny. It was a diagnosis. "You are not complete." The words were the master key that unlocked every failure. Claire's blueprint. The VC's unfinished. Marissa's not fit. Elena's new phase. Veverin's refinery. He was the foundation, the wildcatter, the blueprint, the seed. He could make kings. He could not be one. Alex turned off his phone, surrendering to the dark. The prophecy was no longer cryptic. It was the operating system of his life. He was a kingmaker, and the price of every crown he fashioned was a piece of his own. He closed his eyes, and his father's voice surfaced from memory, steady and unyielding. "There is no defeat until you quit, and a maxim never quits." It was the one lesson that had survived every failure. It wasn't a pep talk. It was a commandment. Quitting wasn't an option. Not for him. Not ever. But he'd been trying to win the wrong war. His eyes opened, sharp and clear in the dim room. They swept over the artifacts of his incompletion. Claire's scarf, Marissa's photo, Elena's notebook, the stacks of dead ventures. They weren't just relics of loss. They were data. Claire had needed his blueprint. Marissa had needed his confidence. Elena had needed his clarity. Veverin had needed his spark. They hadn't taken something from him. He had given them exactly what they lacked. And in doing so, he had made them whole. He was the missing component in their machine of success. The catalyst. The keystone. The old woman's whisper coiled through the silence. "You are not complete." A cold, ruthless smile touched his lips for the first time in months. She was right. He wasn't a finished product. He was a tool. A uniquely brilliant, precision instrument for building empires. And a tool didn't yearn for a throne. A tool demanded a purpose and a price. The curse wasn't that he couldn't succeed. It was that his success was relational. It existed only when applied to someone else's potential. So be it. If he could not be the king, he would become the force behind the throne. The architect in the shadows. The strategist whose name was whispered but never spoken aloud. He stood, energy humming beneath his skin, not the frantic energy of desperation, but the focused voltage of a decision. He walked to his desk, a clean, severe surface amidst the chaos. He took a blank sheet of paper. At the top, he wrote 2 words, "The Kingmaker." Beneath it, he began to draft the tenets of his new reality. The rules of engagement. 1. No more than 3 years. His involvement would have an expiration date. He would not become entangled, attached, or exposed. 2. 30% of increased valuation or earnings. No negotiation. His gift was not a service. It was a transformation. The price was the proof. 3. Absolute anonymity. He would be a ghost in the machine. Clients would know him only by color. Mr. Blue, Mr. Red, Mr. Gray. 4. No personal entanglements. The launch pad did not fall in love with the rocket. He was not surrendering. He was strategizing. He was taking the chaotic, painful pattern of his life and codifying it into a weapon. He would systematize the curse. The world saw his failures. They would never see him again. They would only see his work in the stunning comeback, the miraculous turnaround, the sudden, inexplicable rise of those he chose to elevate. He looked once more at the scarf, the photo, the notebook. The ghosts were silent now. They were not hauntings. They were his first, unwilling clients. His proof of concept. Alex Maxim never quits. He had simply found a game he was built to win. Outside, the city glittered, a landscape of kingdoms waiting to be built, of rulers waiting to be crowned. And in the quiet of his apartment, the Kingmaker picked up his phone. It was time to find his first official client. The legend was no longer something that happened to him. It was something he would begin. Now for a short promo, at Novella Station, we believe real drama isn't a bad day. It's a brilliant mind cursed to build thrones it can never sit on. Hit subscribe for more stories where the greatest villain is destiny itself. Chapter 2. The First Pawn. The next morning, Alex moved with a feverish, electric purpose. The paralysis of the night before had been incinerated by decision. He'd spent the pre-dawn hours at a discreet, exorbitant print shop in the financial district, ordering cards on a rush. They arrived by courier before noon. A small, heavy stack, impossibly sleek. No name, no title, no company, just a single word, engraved in deep, matte gold foil across the front of the charcoal gray stock, Kingmaker. On the back, a single, untraceable burner number etched in the same gold. They felt less like business cards and more like talismans or warrants. He slid one from the stack, running his thumb over the embossed letters. It was a promise and a threat, all in one. A contract before the terms were even spoken. The hollow exhaustion in his gut had been replaced by a different kind of emptiness. Hunger. Real, physical hunger. He hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. He ducked in the first decent-looking place he saw, a restaurant called the Oak Grill. It was trying for upscale casual, dark wood, soft lighting, the smell of roasted garlic and seared meat hanging richly in the air. He ordered the first thing on the menu and a glass of ice water. As he waited, his eyes, newly calibrated to spot structural weakness, scanned the room. The lunch crowd was thin. A few businessmen, a couple on an awkward date. And then, by the large street front window, a man. He wasn't a customer. He wasn't a manager. He was a statue of defeat. Middle-aged, with the build of someone who'd once been vigorous, now softened by stress. He stood perfectly still, arms hanging loosely at his sides, staring not out at the street, but the restaurant's empty dining floor. His expression wasn't one of anger or frustration, but of a profound, weary grief. It was the look of a father at a child's sickbed. Alex knew that look. He'd worn it. He'd breathed it. This was not a bad day. This was the culmination. His food arrived, a steak, perfectly medium rare, vegetables crisp. He ate slowly, deliberately, watching the man the way a sculptor studies a block of marble. He saw the slight tremble in the man's hand as he finally reached out and adjusted a crooked painting on the wall. A pointless, tender gesture. He saw the way the hostess glanced at him with pity before looking quickly away. When the waitress came to clear his plate, Alex nodded toward the man. The owner, the waitress, followed his gaze, her expression softening with a mix of affection and sorrow. Mr. Williams. Yeah, this was his first place. Opened it 15 years ago. He's here most days now, just watching. She lowered her voice. The whole chain's struggling. Rumor is they might not make the quarter. Greg Williams, Alex said, the name settling into place. He'd seen the headlines months ago about a local dining empire facing stiff competition from trendy new chains. He paid in cash, left a generous tip, and stood. He didn't approach directly. Instead, he walked to the window and stood beside Greg Williams, shoulder to shoulder, looking out at the same view of the slow street. He said nothing for a full minute, letting his presence settle. Greg finally broke the silence, his voice gravelly with disuse. You know, when I opened these doors, there was a line around the block. For weeks. He didn't look at Alex. He spoke to the ghost of that memory in the glass. We were the new thing. The place to be. I knew every customer by name. Alex remained silent, a respectful listener in the confessional. Now, Greg gave a short, humorless laugh that sounded like a cough. Now we're the remember one place. The food's still good. The staff's still great. But we're background noise. The corporates with their marketing budgets and celebrity chefs, they didn't beat us on quality. They just drowned us out. He finally turned his head, and Alex saw the raw desperation in his eyes. I've poured every cent I have, every cent I can borrow, back into this. My wife, she doesn't understand. My kids think I'm a relic. 15 years. I built this from a hole in the wall. And it's going to die here, in this room where it was born. The confession hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It was more than a business problem. It was an identity in collapse. Alex spoke then, his voice low, calm, and utterly certain. It was a tone he'd used on Marissa before an audition, on Elena before a thesis defense. A tone that brooked no argument with reality. You're looking at it wrong, Greg. Greg blinked, startled by the bluntness. Oh, and how should I look at it? As a roaring success. As a foundation, Alex said, turning to face him fully. You didn't build a chain of restaurants. You built a location. A place. This city has 100 restaurants. It doesn't have 100 places with a soul. You're trying to win a war, they're fighting with money. You can't. So you changed the war. Greg's eyes narrowed, a flicker of the old fighter rising through the despair. Change it to what? To one of meaning. Alex's gaze was intense. What's in your blood, Greg? Not what's on the trend reports. Where did your grandmother cook? What did your father grow? What's the recipe that means something that nobody else has? Greg stared, bewildered. My grandfather was from Louisiana. He cooked Creole Cajun. My mom's family is from Oaxaca. Her moles, they're not on the menu. They're too complicated, too specific. Specific, Alex repeated, as if it were the most beautiful word he'd ever heard. That's your weapon. Not American Grill. Not comfort food. You are Williams' Heritage Kitchen. You are the keeper of tribal recipes. The story is the sauce. The legacy is the ingredient. You don't have a chain. You have chapters. Each restaurant showcases a different lineage, a different story. This one becomes the Bayou chapter. The next, the Oaxacan chapter. It's not a meal. It's an heirloom. It's exclusive because it's authentic. You're not selling food. You're selling belonging. He watched the words land, watched them ignite a tiny, almost forgotten spark in Greg's eyes. It was the spark of a man seeing a path where before there was only a wall. That would take a complete rebrand. New menus, new training, a story. It would take courage, Alex corrected softly. And a guide. Greg studied him now, really seeing him for the first time. The sharp suit, the calm authority, the eyes that seemed to see 3 moves ahead. Who are you? Alex didn't smile. He reached into his inner pocket and retrieved the heavy, gray card. He didn't hand it over. He simply held it between 2 fingers, letting the gold engraving catch the light from the window. Kingmaker. Greg read the word, his brow furrowing. He took the card. It had heft. It felt like a key. He flipped it over. The single, burnished number. What is this? Greg whispered. A choice, Alex said. He met Greg's gaze, his own eyes like polished stone. You can stand here and watch your legacy be erased. Or you can call that number. And I will help you build a new one. One so rooted in truth that no corporate chain can ever touch it. But understand, if I do this, you will follow my strategy without question. You will pay my fee without negotiation. And you will never, ever speak my name. The air between them crackled with the magnitude of the offer. It was insane. It was salvation. Greg Williams looked down at the card in his hand, then out at his dying dream, then back at the enigmatic stranger who spoke of tribes and chapters. What do I call you? Greg finally asked, his voice barely audible. A ghost of a smile touched Alex's lips. You can call me Mr. Blue. Greg sat alone in the cavernous loft, the contract glowing faintly on the tablet screen. His phone buzzed again, confirmation of funds transferred. $2.5 million. Real. Immediate. He exhaled, a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. For the first time in months, the weight in his chest shifted. Not gone, never gone, but transformed. Above him, the lamp swung slightly, casting long shadows across the steel table. Shadows that looked less like ruin now, and more like the outlines of something being built. The Kingmaker had placed his first bet, and Greg Williams realized, with a shiver, that he had just wagered his soul in return. Greg stared at the card until the gold letters seemed to burn into his vision. Kingmaker. The word was absurd, arrogant, and yet the stranger's calm voice, the piercing clarity of his diagnosis, had felt like the first gulp of air after being underwater for years. Greg waited until he was in the stark silence of his empty office above the restaurant, the hum of the failing walk-in freezer a grim soundtrack. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled out his phone and dialed the number. It rang once, twice. Mr. Williams. The voice on the other end was the same. Cool, composed, expecting him. How did you? Caller ID is a basic tool. You decided to talk terms. Good. There was no warmth, only efficiency. Meet me. Tonight. 9 p.m. The address I'm texting you now. Come alone. Bring your current P and L statements, your debt schedule, and your pride. You'll need to leave one of them with me. The line went dead. A second later, a text buzzed through with an address in the warehouse district. The location was a raw, converted loft space, completely empty save for a single steel table and 2 chairs in the center, under a hanging industrial lamp. Alex sat in one chair, a thin file folder and a tablet before him. He wore a simple black sweater and looked, Greg thought with a pang, impossibly young. But his eyes in the harsh light were ageless. Sit, Alex said, not looking up from his tablet. The financials. For an hour, Greg laid bare his ruin. The sliding sales, the crushing debt to suppliers, and the bank, the second mortgage on his home. Alex asked sharp, rapid-fire questions, his fingers flying over the tablet, building models. He didn't judge. He absorbed data. Finally, Alex set the tablet down. The tribal chapter's concept is your only viable vector, but it requires capital you don't have and credibility you've lost. A bank won't touch you. Investors see a sinking ship. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. So, I will provide the initial capital. Greg's head jerked up. You? But the card said consultant. I am not a consultant. Alex cut in, his voice flat. I'm an architect. And architects do not design castles on sand. I will ensure the foundation is built with my materials. My terms are non-negotiable. You will listen, and you will answer yes or no. There is no maybe. Understood. Greg swallowed, the word yes sticking in his throat. He forced it out. Understood. Alex laid it out, his voice a clinical monotone that brooked no emotional reaction. 1. The total budget for Phase 1, rebranding this flagship location, menu R&D, marketing launch, and operational overhaul, is $7.5 million. Greg flinched. Alex didn't blink. Of that, I will invest the first $2.5 million. My money. This is not a gift. It is a loan with an incentive. He tapped the tablet, and a contract page appeared. You will repay this $2.5 million principal, plus a compounding interest of 1% per month. But only once the Williams Heritage Kitchen chain reports a net profit higher than $3 million for 3 consecutive months. If you never hit that threshold, the debt remains, but I cannot call it due. It is tied to your success. My success. Greg's mind raced. It was a lifeline, but a razor-wire one. The interest was steep, but it was deferred until he was profitable. Alex was betting on himself, tying his own repayment to the venture's triumph. 2. Alex continued. For a period of 5 years from the first profitable month, as defined above, I will receive 30% of the chain's net profit. Not revenue. Profit. This is my fee for building your kingdom. 30%. It was a king's ransom. It was also, Greg knew, a percentage of something that currently didn't exist. He was selling a share of a dream, not a reality. 3. Alex said, his gaze turning laser-like. From this moment until the day I deem the transformation complete and self-sustaining, a period not to exceed 3 years, I have final decision-making authority on all strategic, financial, and operational matters pertaining to this brand. You're the face, the heart, the story. I am the brain and the nerve center. You will execute the vision. My word is final. Greg felt a hot rush of protest. This was his life's work. To hand over the reins to this kid. As if reading his mind, Alex's voice softened, just a fraction. Greg, you have been trying to save your restaurant. You have failed. I am offering to build your legacy. That requires a different builder. You ask me who I am. I am the man who does not fail at realizing other people's visions. That is my curse. And tonight, it can become your blessing. The word from the restaurant window echoed. Legacies don't die. They just wait for someone to remind the world why they mattered. Greg looked at the coal numbers on the tablet. He looked at the empty, cavernous space of a loft, a metaphor for his own hollowed-out prospects. Then he looked at Alex. The calm was unnerving. It wasn't the calm of someone who hoped. It was the calm of someone who knew. He had nothing left to lose but the last shreds of his pride. Why? Greg heard himself ask, his voice rough. Why would you risk your own money? For the first time, Alex's expression shifted, not to a smile, but to something more profound, a stark, unvarnished truth. Because you're my proof of concept, Greg, and a maxim never quits. He just find a new battlefield. He slid the tablet across the table. The contract is loaded. Read it, sign it, or walk back to your empty dining room and wait for the auction notice. The silence stretched. Greg could hear the distant sound of traffic, the beating of his own heart. He picked up the stylus. His hand hovered. He thought of his wife's tired eyes, his children's confused embarrassment. He thought of the line around the block 15 years ago. He thought of his grandfather's gumbo recipe, scribbled in faded ink, sitting in a drawer at home and used for a decade. He signed. Alex took the tablet back. He stood up. The meeting clearly concluded. Tomorrow, at 7 a.m., we begin. We start with the gumbo. Be ready to cook. Not as a restaurateur, as a grandson. He walked towards the elevator, a solitary figure in the vast, dark space. Mr. Blue, Greg called out, the alias feeling strange on his tongue. Alex paused, not looking back. Thank you. Don't, Alex said, his voice echoing slightly. Thank me when your name is a byword for heritage, not for failure. Thank me when you look at that window and see a line again. The elevator doors closed, leaving Greg Williams alone with a signed contract that felt like a pact with a devil or a deal with a ghost. In his hand, his phone buzzed. A transfer alert. $2.5 million. Available. Now, the Kingmaker had placed his first bet. The game was not just on, it was irrevocably, terrifyingly real. Time for a quick break. At Novella Station, we don't do simple makeovers. We do full-blown legacy resurrections. Want to see how a dying restaurant becomes a dynasty? You're in the right place. Subscribe for more. Chapter 3. The Alchemy of Authenticity. The transformation of the Oak Grill did not begin with a hammer or a paint can. It began with a pot of gumbo at 6:17 a.m. Greg arrived, haunted and hollow-eyed, to find the kitchen lights on. Alex was already there, leaning against the stainless steel counter. You're late, Alex said, his voice flat. No greeting. He nodded to a handwritten card on the counter. Greg's own, from a box in his attic. Your grandfather's recipe. The one you said was too niche. Today, niche becomes exclusive. Start. Greg's hand shook as he chopped the holy trinity of onion, celery, and bell pepper. It feels small. Just a stew. It's not a stew, Alex countered, not looking up from his tablet. It's a declaration. The first sentence of your new story. Don't talk. Cook. An hour later, the roux was the color of old mahogany, the air thick with andouille and thyme. Greg ladled a portion into a bowl. Alex tasted it. He closed his eyes. Who was he? Alex asked. Who? The man who taught you this. Your grandfather. Oh, he was a shrimper. Out of Homa. Loud. Smelled like salt and Camel cigarettes. Good, Alex said, opening his eyes. That's the first ingredient. Not the shrimp. The memory. This place is no longer the Oak Grill. From today, this location is the Gulf and Grain. It's the story of a shrimper's kitchen. Now do it again. And this time, hear the water. For days later, Greg's wife, Anya, stood beside him, a silent, tense presence. She guided his hand over the molkajit, grinding chilies and chocolate. My abuela would say your wrist is weak, she murmured, not unkindly. I believe her, Greg grunted, sweat on his brow. Alex watched from the corner, a silent auditor. When the deep, complex sauce was done, he sampled it. What is this called? He asked Anya. Mole Negro. Black mole. From Oaxaca. It's not black, Alex observed. It's the color of a starless night. What's its story? Anya lifted her chin. It's for fiestas. For weddings. It takes 3 days. It's a promise. Alex set the spoon down with a clean click. Then that's what we'll sell. A promise. He turned to Greg. The second location. We'll call it La Promesa. The menu is this. 8 variations of mole. Nothing else. It's not a restaurant. It's a covenant. Greg stared. A whole restaurant for one sauce. For one idea, Alex corrected. People don't buy food. They buy meaning. He nodded to Anya. Is your meaning here? The story is hers. A week in, flour hung in the air like mist. Greg kneaded dough, his muscles burning. It's just bread, he panted. It's the foundation of civilization, Alex said from the doorway, a ghost in the dawn light. What does it remind you of? Not a bakery. A place. Greg thought, pummeling the dough. A farmhouse table. In Tuscany. Sunlight. Simplicity. Then that's the third concept, Alex said, finality in his tone. Tavola sola. The table alone. A communal table. 6 courses. Just bread, olive oil, cured meats, preserves. Rustic. Uncomplicated. You're not selling a meal. You're selling the memory of a simpler time. 3 different restaurants? Greg asked, bewildered. We're failing at one. You were failing at being everything to everyone, Alex stated, walking over to examine the dough's elasticity. I'm making you one profound thing to the right someone. Gulf and grain. La promesa. Tavola sola. 1 story per house. Clarity is power. The rhythm became a catechism. Before dawn, the kitchen became a laboratory of memory. For the rich, yogurt-marinated curry, Alex named the concept spice and thread. Your wife's family's recipe. It's about the thread of tradition. The menu tells their migration story. For the delicate, hand-folded dumplings, he sketched a logo on a napkin, a single, perfect pleat. The 9th pleat. It's the one that seals the flavor. The perfectionist's kitchen will charge for the artistry. Greg, once hesitant, began to speak with his hands, his voice finding its old strength. This tagine, my friend's Moroccan grandmother taught me. She said the clay pot remembers every meal it's ever cooked. The remembering pot, Alex said instantly, making a note. That's the 5th. The marketing writes itself. One evening, after a brutal 18-hour day, perfecting a smoked brisket recipe for Gulf and grain, Greg slumped onto a stool. The kitchen was a beautiful wreck. Why does it work when you say it? Greg asked, exhaustion making him bold. The recipes, they were always there. I just saw leftovers. You see legends. Alex, who was calibrating the software for the new point-of-sale system, paused. You were solving for food cost and foot traffic. I solve for longing. People are empty, Greg. Not hungry. Empty. You're not filling stomachs. You're filling holes in their history. That's a premium service. He finally looked at Greg, the blue light of the tablet reflecting in his eyes. I'm not giving you a menu. I'm giving you a mirror. Let them see their own lost family dinners in your food, and they will pay anything to sit at your table. The final milestone arrived on the eve of the soft opening for Gulf and Grain. The old sign was gone. In its place, under a soft spotlight, glowed the new name. Below it, in smaller script, where the water ends and the hearth begins. Greg and Alex stood on the cool sidewalk, looking up. It's a hell of a gamble, Greg whispered. It's not a gamble, Alex said, his voice quiet but absolute. It's a correction. The market is wrong. You were wrong. I'm right. Tomorrow, we prove it. He handed Greg a single, heavy key, an old, skeleton key, not a modern copy. It's your kitchen, your story, my strategy. Remember the difference. Alex turned and walked down the street, his form dissolving into the shadows between the street lamps. Greg Williams stood alone, the cold, solid weight of the key in his palm. He was no longer a bankrupt restaurateur. He was the keeper of a flame he'd forgotten how to light. And the Kingmaker, a shadow already moving to its next canvas, had just shown him the match. Time for a quick break. At Novella Station, we don't do simple makeovers. We do full-blown legacy resurrections. Want to see how Alex created a phenomenon, something that will stand the test of times? Keep watching and subscribe. Chapter 4. the slow burn. Part 1. The Crucible. The rebirth of Gulf and Grain was not just in recipes or stories. It was in rules. Alex believed that memory without discipline was sentimentality, and sentimentality burned out. He built the invisible scaffolding that would hold Greg's heritage upright, turning heartfelt chaos into repeatable reverence. Within days, the staff, a wary, loyal crew Greg had kept on through the lean times, received crisp black binders. Standard operating procedures. Every dish was measured in grams and minutes. Every garnish placed with tweezers at a 10-degree angle. Every plate inspected under a warm light at the pass before it left the kitchen. "This is soulless," Greg protested once, watching a cook time the roux with a digital thermometer. "My grandfather used his eyes. His nose." Alex didn't look up from the supplier contract he was reviewing. "Your grandfather cooked for 12. You will cook for 1,200. Soul scales through system, not through chaos." His eyes and nose are now Rule 4.2. Roux achieves mahogany stage at 185 degrees Celsius. Hold for 90 seconds before adding Trinity. His genius is now reproducible. That is how you honor him. The transformation was surgical. The kitchen wall facing the dining room was replaced with floor-to-ceiling glass. Cooking became theater. Patrons watched the roux darken like a magic trick, saw the careful fold of a dumpling pleat, heard the hiss of the tagine being unsealed. Transparency builds trust, Alex had written in the manual. Let them see the craft. Even waiting was redesigned. The moment a guest was seated, a small, complimentary memory plate arrived, a slice of the day's bread with a swipe of house-preserved lemon butter, a thimble-sized cup of spiced broth. Anticipation is the first course. The dining room itself was softened. Harsh lights were replaced with warm, golden glows. Chairs were padded. In one corner, Alex installed a discreet, glass-walled hearth nook, a supervised play area with a vetted caretaker. It wasn't advertised as childcare. It was presented as giving your family story a moment of peace. Part 2. The First Ember, months 1 to 4. For the first 3 months, Gulf and Grain simmered. It didn't explode. It gained a steady, local heartbeat. Regulars from the Oak Grill days returned, bewildered but pleased. New faces trickled in, drawn by the strange, specific warmth of the place. Alex was a ghost in the machinery. He'd appear at 5 a.m. to audit inventory, his fingers flying over a tablet, cross-referencing spice weights with sales data. He renegotiated every supplier contract, not just for cost, but for provenance. "This paprika is from a factory in Hungary," he said flatly to their spice rep, sliding a sample jar across Greg's office desk. "I need pimentón de la Vera from the Diaz family farm in Spain, the one that smokes their peppers over home oak. The story is on the label or it's not in the pot." He secured lines of credit with local farmers, prepaying for harvest to ensure consistency. He designed the supply chain like a nervous system, responsive, resilient, and traceable back to a single source. Meanwhile, the blueprint for La Promesa, the mole concept, was finalized. Locations scouted, chefs trained in Oaxaca, the molcajetes sourced from a specific artisan in Mitla. It opened in month 4 to a quiet, reverent crowd. There was no grand opening party, just a door opening and the deep, complex scent of history greeting the street. Part 3. The Spark, month 8. The spark came from an unlikely source at Flavor Seeker, a food influencer with 2 million followers known for cynical, snarky reviews. She visited Gulf and Grain on a whim, expecting to mock another theme park nostalgia joint. Her video, posted the next day, was titled, "I went to roast a gimmick. I left crying at the table." The camera showed her, usually so composed, wiping her eyes with a linen napkin. "This isn't food," she said, her voice shaky. "This is a seance. My grandmother was from Baton Rouge. She's been gone 10 years. I just tasted her gumbo. I don't know how. I just did." The video went viral, not just for the food, but for the raw, unvarnished emotion. It was viewed 12 million times. Part 4. The Flame, month 10. The viral video was a firecracker. What followed was a sustained detonation. a producer from Culinary Chronicles, a prestigious national food documentary series, saw at Flavor Seeker's video. They weren't interested in a restaurant review. They were working on an episode titled The Keepers, Cuisine on the Brink of Extinction. They featured Gulf and Grain, La Promesa, and the just-opened Tavola Sola not as restaurants, but as living archives. The segment showed Greg, not as a slick restaurateur, but as a solemn translator of his grandfather's shrimp knife, his wife Anya speaking softly in Spanish about her abuela's hands, the bakers at Tavola Sola singing an old Tuscan milling song as they kneaded. The nation watched. The story of tribal recipes and edible heritage entered the mainstream. Part 5. The Consecration, Month 11. Jonathan Finch, the notoriously cantankerous critic for the Metropolitan Review, whose praise could anoint a king and whose scorn could shatter stone, was deeply skeptical of the heritage hype. He booked a table under a pseudonym at the Ninth Pleat, the dumpling concept. His review, published a week later, was a masterpiece of surrendered cynicism. I came to dissect a trend. I left having witnessed a kind of culinary holiness. The Ninth Pleat is not a marketing slogan. It is a covenant of patience. Each dumpling is a perfect, pregnant envelope of silence before the burst of flavor. This is not dinner. It is a meditation on care. Williams' Heritage Kitchen isn't a chain, it is a canon. And Greg Williams, improbably, is its high priest. Part 6. The Empire, Months 12 to 18. The following 6 months were a blur of controlled, magnificent growth. The remaining concepts, spice and thread, the remembering pot, hearth fire, salt and story, the Providence, field song, and the last catch, opened, each one a distinct chapter, each immediately booked solid for months. Alex's systems held. The supply chain, stressed but unbroken, delivered. The staff, proud and fiercely loyal to the house rules, maintained the standards. The profit graphs looked like mountain ranges. One evening, Greg's eldest son, David, a sharply dressed executive at a major tech firm, called his father, his voice buzzing with disbelief. "Dad, you're not going to believe this. My CEO, Mr. Norman, just called me into his office. Not about a project. He asked me as a personal favor." David paused, audibly shaking his head. He said his 30th anniversary is next week, and his wife has been trying to get a table at the Remembering Pot for 2 months. He asked if I could help. He said, "I hear your father is the reason that place exists." Greg, standing in the office of the original Gulf and Grain, now the bustling headquarters of a 12-location empire, looked out at his kingdom. He thought of the hollow ghost he'd been by the window 18 months prior. "Tell him I'll take care of it personally, son," Greg said, his voice steady with a pride that was no longer fragile. Part 7. The Architect Departs. Part 7. The Architect Departs. The day after the 18-month mark, Alex appeared in Greg's office for the last time. He placed 2 items on the desk, a final financial report and the original skeleton key. The 3-month profitability threshold was achieved 11 months ago, Alex stated, his voice as clean and unadorned as the lines of the new furniture. "My loan, with agreed interest, has been repaid in full. My 30% share of the profits for the last 5 months has been transferred to the designated holding company. That arrangement will continue, as per our contract, for the next 5 years. Your empire is solvent, systematized, and self-sustaining." Greg looked from the staggering numbers on the report to the key. A memory flashed, vivid and surreal. The obnoxious gold card in this very restaurant's dim light. The insane gamble of his life's work and $2.5 million of a stranger's money. Anya's voice, strained with fear, calling it a final, devastating scam. An impulse he couldn't explain, a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. That impulse hadn't just saved his legacy. It had forged a dynasty. "Stay," Greg heard himself say, the word bursting out with an urgency that surprised him. "As a partner. A real one. A tenth of the company. A seat on the board. Name it. You built this. It's as much yours as mine." For a moment, the polished mask of the consultant slipped. Alex's eyes, usually chips of glacial ice, showed a flicker of something ancient and weary. a recognition of the offer's genuine warmth, its profound mistake. "Greg," Alex said, and his voice was quieter now, almost gentle. "I'm not a king. I could design the throne, forge the crown, and train the court. But I cannot sit in the seat. He gestured to the room. The building, the empire beyond, already has its king, and he is more than capable. My curse and my gift is that I only work in the becoming. Once the kingdom is established, my purpose here is fulfilled." He picked up his simple leather satchel, the only item he ever carried. "My role is to find the next Greg Williams, the next ruler who has lost their way, standing in the ruins of their own potential, waiting for someone to show them that their rubble is the foundation of a palace." A bittersweet understanding settled over Greg. He wasn't being abandoned. He was being graduated. "I don't know any other kings like that," Greg said, a sad smile touching his lips. "But I might know a queen." Alex paused, his hand on the doorframe. "Dorothy Duran," Greg continued, leaning forward. "The widow running the Duran Group logistics empire. My old spice supplier. She's formidable, but the vultures are circling. Her children, her board. She's holding it together with grit and grief, but the center isn't holding. She doesn't need a business consultant. She needs a kingmaker." Alex finished, the words a soft exhale. His gaze had turned inward, assessing, calculating a new battlefield. A queen without a clear succession is a kingdom begging for a civil war. Alex extended his hand. For a moment, he wasn't in a CEO's office. He was back by the window of a dying restaurant, a heavy, absurd card in his hand, his wife's worried voice in his ear calling a scam. He remembered the terrifying leap of faith, the gamble he couldn't explain even to himself. That single, impulsive yes hadn't just salvaged his legacy, it had multiplied it into a dynasty. He reached out and took Alex's offered hand. The handshake was firm, final. The handshake was firm, final. Not between a client and a consultant, but between two men who had defied a curse, one by ruling, the other by refusing to. "Thank you, Greg, for the referral, and for proving the model." Then he was gone. No sentiment, no lingering farewell. The door clicked shut with definitive softness. Greg stood alone in the silent office, the hum of his thriving empire a comforting song below. He was the king, and the kingmaker, a ghost already tuning his ear to the whisper of a queen in distress, had moved on to his next throne room. Now for a short promo. At Novella Station, we believe real drama isn't a bad day. It's a brilliant mind cursed to build thrones it can never sit on. Hit subscribe for more stories where the greatest villain is destiny itself. Chapter 5. The Queen's Gambit. The Duran Group headquarters occupied the top 15 floors of a steel and glass spire. From her corner office on the 57th floor, Dorothy Duran stared at 3 embossed resignation letters on her mahogany desk. They were not resignations. They were opening moves in a coup. A soft knock. "Mrs. Duran, your 2 o'clock is here." A Mr. Red. She didn't look up. "Red?" "I was expecting Hutchinson from legal." He wouldn't say, only that Greg Williams sent him. Her assistant, Liam, sounded perplexed. "He gave me this to give to you." Liam placed a single object on the edge of her desk. Not a business card. It was a slab of brushed, black metal, cool to the touch, slightly heavier than it should be. Across its center, in deep, engraved gold foil that caught the sterile office light, was one word. Kingmaker. On the back, a single, burnished phone number. Dorothy stared at it. A disbelieving laugh, dry and hollow, escaped her. It was absurd, arrogant, the kind of theatrical prop a conman or a megalomaniac would use. Greg Williams had sent her a man who called himself a color and handed out metal fortune cookies. "Send him in," she said, her voice tight, "and cancel my afternoon." The man who entered was young, younger than her children. His suit was good but quiet. He carried only a tablet. The profound dissonance between the obnoxious, regal card and the calm, unassuming young man who delivered it was so extreme it felt like a deliberate psychological test. She did not rise. She flicked the metal card with a manicured finger, sending it skittering a few inches across the polished wood. "Mr. Red," she said, the alias tasting ridiculous. Explain this. Before I have security explain the exit to you. He didn't glance at the card. His gaze was already on her, measuring, unflinching. It's a reminder, Mrs. Duran, that you're not hiring a consultant. You are engaging a force of nature. Greg Williams was where you are, standing in a room that felt like a tomb, holding that same card. It is a promise and a warning. A warning of what? Bankruptcy by pretension. A warning that the solution will not be found in a spreadsheet or a boardroom PowerPoint, he said, his voice devoid of any salesmanship. It was merely factual. It will be found in the foundation. Your problem is not the resignations on your desk. It is the empty throne behind you. You are a queen with no heir, defending a kingdom from those who believe they can rule its parts better than you can hold its heart. The heir left the room. He hadn't been near the drawer. No one knew about the letters. Ow! It's the only story that fits the data, he interrupted, not unkindly. Your sons hold titles, but not respect. Your CFO sees instability and imagines himself the stabilizer. They are not evil. They are logical. You have given them a problem, a dynasty in doubt, and they are proposing their own solutions. To save them, you must first remind them what they would be saving. He finally moved, taking the seat across from her. He ignored the extravagant view. His entire focus was on her, a laser pointed at the heart of her crisis. My terms, he began, and then laid them out. The full access, the 30% of value created, the absolute anonymity, the final authority. Dorothy went very still. 30% of value created, she repeated slowly. Define that. We take the average net profit of the Duran Group for the last 3 fiscal years. A baseline. Any profit above that baseline for the duration of my involvement and for 2 years following its conclusion constitutes value created. My fee is 30% of that excess. A humorless, sharp laugh escaped her. 30%. Boy. She leaned forward, the steel returning to her voice. A top-tier consulting firm with an army of analysts would be lining up at my door for a flat fee of $2 million. And you stroll in here, barely old enough to shave, and ask for 30% of my kingdom, plus full discretion over my decisions? What kind of pirate terms are these? For the first time, a flicker of something, not offense, but a cold acknowledgement of the absurdity, crossed his face. A consulting firm would give you a report, Mrs. Duran, a list of options. They would not save your throne. They would not identify and crown your true heir. They would not rebuild the loyalty of your court. I do not advise. I architect. I do not propose solutions. I engineer outcomes. The price reflects the difference. He stood, the meeting clearly at its precipice. The terms are not negotiable. They're the cost of a dynasty. You have until this evening to decide. The board meets tomorrow. You move. He left, a ghost in a good suit. The metal card sat on her desk, a paperweight for her ruin. 30%. It was outrageous. It was extortion. Her hand hovered over the phone. She had half a mind to call Greg Williams and tear a strip off him for sending this arrogant child. Instead, she called him for a different reason. Greg, you're Mr. Red. He's insane. His terms they're not terms. They're a ransom note. On the other end, Greg Williams was silent for a beat. When he spoke, his voice carried the grounded warmth of a man saved from a fire. Dorothy, when I met him, I was you. I called him Mr. Blue. I thought he was a scam. My wife was sure of it. He asked me for 30% of profits for 5 years, plus a personal loan from him to me. I signed because I had nothing left to lose. He paused, letting the memory hang. He is young. It's the most disarming thing about him. But Dorothy, listen to me. That young man looked at my dying restaurant and didn't see a failing business. He saw a forgotten family gospel. He didn't just save my legacy. He resurrected it in a form so powerful I can't recognize the man I was before him. The fee feels like a ransom until you realize he's not taking something you have. He's creating something you thought was lost forever. He doesn't want a piece of your company as it is. He wants a piece of the empire he will build from its bones. And in my experience, that is a bargain. The line went quiet. Dorothy stared out at the harbor, the container ships like neatly arranged dominoes. A dynasty, or a slow, Polite dismantling. A pirate's fee or a funeral dirge? He gave me until tonight, she said finally, her voice weary. Then you have time to look at your ledger, and then look at your husband's portrait, Greg said, and decide which one you want to honor. She ended the call. The office was silent save for the hum of the city below. She picked up the metal card again. Kingmaker. It was still arrogant. It was still absurd. But Greg was no fool, and she was out of options. At 6:47 p.m., she picked up her private cell and dialed the burnished number on the card. Mr. Red, she said when he answered, her voice devoid of all its earlier heat, leaving only the cool, hard resolve of a decision made. Be at Terminal 7 at 9 o'clock tonight. And bring your architect's eyes. It seems you have a queen to serve. She paused, the ghost of a real, grim smile touching her lips. The courier arrived at the Duran Group headquarters 37 minutes after Dorothy ended the call. Liam brought in the envelope himself, his expression one of profound confusion. It's from Fisk, Holden, and Green, he said, naming one of the most prestigious and notoriously expensive corporate law firms in the city. Dorothy took the heavy, cream-colored envelope. It felt like a brick. She dismissed Liam and slid it open with a jade letter opener. Inside was not a simple agreement. It was a bound treatise, over 100 pages thick, its pages crisp and dense with impenetrable legalese. A sticky note on the front, in elegant, handwritten script, read, "For Mrs. D. Duran. Review and execute. K.R. Kingmaker." She had barely begun to scan the dizzying text when her office line rang. A man with a voice like smooth gravel identified himself as Arthur Fisk, senior partner at Fisk, Holden, and Green. "Mrs. Duran, I am calling as a courtesy to walk you through the execution of the Maxim Retainer Agreement. My firm has been engaged to represent the interests of the service provider, Kingmaker Consulting, LLC. I understand time is of the essence before your board meeting tomorrow." A cold, surreal clarity washed over her. This boy had a top-tier law firm on immediate retainer, ready to draft a 100-page contract in the time it took for a courier to cross town. This was not a solo act. This was an entity. "Mr. Fisk," she said, her voice tight. The term 30% of value created, defined in Section 4.1, subsection B, with the baseline calculation methodology detailed in Exhibit C, he replied without hesitation. The auditing provision for verification is outlined in Section 7.3. It is, if I may say, a remarkably clean and aggressive performance-based structure. Unconventional, but legally airtight. For the next 45 minutes, Fisk guided her through the highlights with stoic, dispassionate efficiency. He was not her lawyer. He was the instrument of the other side, yet his professionalism was impeccable. Clause 2.5, Final Decision-Making Authority. For the defined engagement period, all strategic, operational, and financial decisions within the scope of the agreed-upon transformation objectives shall be subject to the provider's final review and binding veto. The crown jewel lock in Exhibit E. You cannot sell, spin off, or significantly alter the core logistics assets, Terminals 7, 9, and the Pacific Freight Arm, without provider consent during the term. Anonymity and non-disclosure, Section 9. A breach here, Mrs. Duran, carries not only severe financial penalties, but would immediately and permanently terminate all support. The provider would become a ghost. He finished. The execution pages are flagged. Do you have any substantive questions on the terms as presented? She had 1,000. They all boiled down to one. Am I a fool? She saw her husband's face in the photograph on her desk. She saw the resignation letters in the drawer. She saw the cold, assessing eyes of the young man who saw a dynasty where others saw a sinking ship. "None," she said, her voice hollow. "Very well. Please initial each flag page and sign on the final execution lines. A courier will wait in your lobby to return the executed documents to my office by 10 p.m. tonight for counter-signature." Dorothy Duran, matriarch of a regional empire, spent the next 20 minutes in the silent, cavernous office, initialing page after page of a contract that signed away a staggering portion of her company's future and the very keys to her kingdom to a phantom. The pen felt like a lead weight. Each scratch of ink was a surrender and a prayer. When the last signature was done, she sealed the document back into the envelope. She felt no relief, only a profound, trembling exhaustion, and beneath it, a sharp, wild sliver of hope. The same feeling she imagined a gambler has watching all their chips pushed to the center of the table. She called Liam to have the envelope taken to the waiting courier. Then she changed her shoes, as instructed. The concrete of Terminal 7 was, indeed, very cold, and her new architect was waiting. The concrete of Terminal 7 was cold, just as Alex had warned. Dorothy Duran stepped into the cavernous space, the smell of salt, diesel, and rust thick in the air. Floodlights cut harsh cones across stacked containers. Cranes swung overhead, and the rhythmic clatter of loaders echoed like a heartbeat. She expected Alex to be waiting at the steel table, aloof and theatrical. Instead, she found him in the middle of the floor, tablet in hand, surrounded by men in reflective vests. He was listening, not commanding, not posturing, listening. Manifest says 22 pallets, but the reefer's running hot. A hauler muttered, frustration in his voice. Alex nodded, tapping notes into his tablet. Compressors cycling too often. That's a maintenance lag, not operator error. Flag it for predictive servicing. The man blinked, surprised. Alex had used his jargon, reefer, compressor cycle, fluently, without hesitation. A crane operator shouted down from his cab. We're stacked wrong on Bay 14. If we don't reshuffle, we'll miss the outbound window. Alex tilted his head, eyes scanning the yard. Then reshuffle. But stagger the loads by gross weight, not container ID. You'll shave 12 minutes off the lift sequence. The operator stared, then gave a slow grin. You know your stuff, kid. Dorothy watched, stunned. This was not a consultant parachuting in with buzzwords. He had done his homework. He had walked the yard, read the manifests, spoken their language. He was fluent in the dialect of her dynasty's foundation, the logistics that kept the empire alive. Finally, Alex broke away and walked to the steel table under the hanging lamp. He gestured for her to sit. She did, her pulse unsteady. You've seen resignations on your desk, Alex began, his voice calm, clinical. But here, on this floor, there is no resignation. There is only rhythm. Containers move, cranes lift, ships dock. This is your heartbeat, and it is irregular. He slid the tablet across to her. On the screen were notes, manifest discrepancies, maintenance delays, inefficiencies in load sequencing. Each one annotated with jargon that only a dock worker would use. You think your problem is succession, he continued. It is not. Your problem is disconnection. Your boardroom speaks in EBITDA and market share. Your loaders speak in reefer cycles and base stacks. You have given them no bridge. That is why your sons look like heirs without crowns. They cannot speak the language of the kingdom they are meant to rule. Dorothy's throat tightened. He was right. She had spent years in glass towers, while the empire's lifeblood pulsed here, in steel and salt. Alex leaned forward, his eyes unflinching. My strategy is simple. We rebuild loyalty from the ground up. We codify standards, SOPs for every crane, every hauler, every manifest. We make the invisible visible. Transparent kitchens worked for Greg Williams. Transparent docks will work for you. Your employees will see their work honored, their language spoken. Your sons will learn it, or they will be replaced. That is how you crown an heir. He tapped the tablet once, finality in the gesture. I do not advise. I architect. I have already begun. The loaders know me. The haulers trust me. The operators listen. They will follow you again if you show them you're listening too. That is the dynasty I will build, but only if you accept my terms. The silence was heavy. Dorothy looked around the terminal, the cranes, the containers, the men who kept them moving. For the first time, she saw not machinery, but a chessboard. Each operator a piece, each manifest a move. And Alex, the Kingmaker, already knew how to play. She exhaled, the cold air burning her lungs. You've done your homework, she said quietly. Alex's gaze was steady. Homework is for students. This is war. and I do not lose wars. The steel table was cold beneath Dorothy's hands. Alex sat across from her, tablet closed, his gaze steady. The board meets tomorrow, Dorothy said, her voice taut. They won't agree to a postponement. They'll see it as weakness. Alex leaned back, unhurried. Then don't ask for a postponement. Force one. Her brow furrowed. Force. How confident are you in your books? Alex asked. If you believe they're clean, call for a government tax audit. It will freeze the board's maneuvering. No one dares stage a coup under official scrutiny. If you're not confident, hire one yourself. Bring in an external auditor, mark them as bank checking your financials. Either way, you buy time. A month, maybe more. Dorothy blinked, unsettled. You want me to invite auditors into my house? That's madness. Alex gestured around them. The cranes, the loaders, the haulers moving containers under floodlight. This is your house, not the glass tower, not the mahogany desk. A company is just a name. This, he swept his hand toward the men shouting in dockside jargon, the machines grinding, the manifest stacked on clipboards. This is the real power, the heartbeat, the dynasty, and this is what you will showcase. She stared at him, confused. Showcase. During the borrowed time, Alex said, his voice low and certain. You will integrate yourself where it matters. You will walk the yard. You will speak their language. You will know the reefer cycles, the base stacks, the load sequences. When the board reconvenes, you will not be a widow defending a throne. You will be a queen who commands the loyalty of the docks. And loyalty, Mrs. Duran, is the only currency that cannot be diluted. The words struck her like a hammer. She thought of her sons, her CFO, the letters on her desk. They had numbers, projections, ambitions. But none of them had this. The smell of salt, the rhythm of cranes, the men who kept the empire alive. Alex leaned forward, his eyes like polished stone. You don't win in the boardroom. You win here. You don't crown an heir with votes. You crown them with loyalty. And loyalty is forged in places like this. Dorothy exhaled, the cold air burning her lungs. For the first time, she saw the path, not through polished speeches or desperate compromises, but through steel, sweat, and salt. I need to make a call, she said, her voice firm now, a decision hardening in her chest. She stepped away from the table, pulling her phone from her pocket. The night air was sharp. She dialed her eldest son, Michael, who was also, nominally, the head of corporate strategy. Michael, she said when he answered, his voice edged with the tension that had become their default. I need you to do something. First thing tomorrow, before the board meeting. What is it? He asked, wary. I need you to call the IRS. Request a voluntary, comprehensive audit of the Duran Group's tax filings for the last 3 years. There was a stunned silence on the line. You're joking. I've never been less humorous in my life. Mother, that's insanity. It's an invitation for scrutiny, for delays, for a pause. She cut him off, her tone allowing no argument. It is a statement of transparency and confidence, and it will legally postpone any major governance votes until its conclusion. Do it. And when the board asks, you tell them it was a strategic decision to ensure the company's standing is unimpeachable before any leadership discussions proceed. She could hear his breath, quick and anxious, through the phone. He was a numbers man, a projection artist. This was a raw, political power play, and it terrified him. Good. And Michael, she added, her voice dropping. After you make the call, I want you here. At Terminal 7. 6 a.m. Wear boots. She hung up before he could reply. When she returned to the table, Alex was waiting. He gave a single, shallow nod. The first move had been made. The audit is a shield, he said. Now we forge the sword. Starting tomorrow, you are not the CEO. You are the apprentice. Javier, the floor manager. He will be your first teacher. And what will you be doing? Dorothy asked. What I do best, Alex replied. Standing. Building systems. Loyalty is emotion. It is powerful, but it is not a strategy. It must be codified. I will be writing the new gospel for your docks. Standard operating procedures for every job here, from the crane cab to the coffee station. We will measure efficiency, honor veteran knowledge, and create a path for every man here to see his worth reflected in the company's success. We will turn this tribe into a meritocracy with you as its chief." He picked up his tablet. "Go home, Mrs. Duran. Tomorrow, the real work begins. And remember, the board is watching the front door, waiting to ambush the queen. So we will stop using the door. We will rule from the docks." He walked away, not toward the exit, but deeper into the terminal, vanishing into the shadows between stacks of containers, already becoming a ghost in the machine he promised to command. Dorothy stood alone for a moment, the vast, cold terminal humming around her. She felt the weight of the signed contract in her briefcase, the absurdity of the metal card in her pocket. She felt the gaze of the men on the floor, who had seen her speaking with the strange, fluent young man. A short promo interlude. Forget fairy godmothers. Our stories feature strategic masterminds who trade in loyalty and leverage. If you're hooked on high-stakes chess games, subscribe to Novella Station. Chapter 6. The Dockside Dynasty. For the first time since Carlos's death, the feeling in her chest wasn't grief or fear. It was the quiet, steady click of a chess piece being moved forward on the board. Alex leaned forward, his eyes like polished stone. "You don't win in the boardroom. You win here. You don't crown an heir with votes. You crown them with loyalty. And loyalty is forged in places like this." Dorothy exhaled, the cold air burning her lungs. For the first time, she saw the path, not through polished speeches or desperate compromises, but through steel, sweat, and salt. The coup would wait. The crowning would come later. For now, she had borrowed time, and a Kingmaker to teach her how to use it. Milestone 1. The Apprentice Queen. The morning after the audit call, Dorothy arrived at Terminal 7 in the pre-dawn gloom. Her Prada heels had been replaced by steel-toed boots, her silk blouse by a durable navy jacket. Javier, the floor manager, met her at the gate with a clipboard and a thermos of coffee, so strong it smelled like tar. "First lesson, Senora," he said, no deference in his voice, only the flat tone of a foreman. "The load. Manifest says 22 pallets for Bay 14. I say 23. Which is right?" Dorothy stared at the paper, then at the stacked goods. "The manifest?" Javier shook his head. "The eyes. Always the eyes. The paper lies. The load doesn't." He handed her the clipboard. "You count. I'll watch." For 3 hours, she shadowed loaders, her back aching, her hands smudged with grease and newsprint from pallet markings. She stumbled over terms: lashing, reefer, deadhead. Each misstep met with patient, blunt correction from a man who'd done this for decades. Alex stood apart, a silent scribe in the chaos. His tablet wasn't just taking notes, it was building a living document. A new tab was open, titled CEO's Compendium and Heirs Primer, Duran Group. Under a section titled The Grind, Day 1 Observations, he typed, "Subject demonstrates willingness to be humbled. Critical. She listens to Javier for 43 minutes before offering first opinion. Incorrect, but attempt noted. Potential for loyalty building exists not through authority, but through earned respect. Note, integrate floor immersion as mandatory 30-day protocol for all future executive training." Milestone 2. The Language of Steel. By the second week, the jargon began to translate. When a foreman shouted, "Bay 14 stacked wrong, gonna miss the window," Dorothy didn't look blank. She saw the visual in her head: containers in the wrong weight sequence, cranes wasting moves. "Stagger them by gross, not by ID," she called back, parroting Alex's earlier fix. The foreman, a grizzled man named Ray, paused and squinted at her. Then he nodded. Once. "Yeah, that'll shave time." It wasn't a solution she'd invented, but she'd spoken the language. Respect, Alex noted in his compendium, follows fluency. He was already drafting the dialect of the doc's glossary for the primer, turning slang into standard operating terminology. Milestone 3. The Jaguar arrival. A splash of chrome and engine per cut through the diesel rumble every morning. Her grandson, Daniel, in her late husband's vintage Jaguar. He'd drive her, more for the excuse to handle the car than from duty. But while Dorothy plunged into the work, Daniel lingered. Alex observed from the elevated control booth. Daniel, 18, with an easy smile, was joking with the foreman by the coffee shack, asking about their kids' soccer games. He remembered names. He didn't talk business, he talked life. In the compendium, under a new section Heir Apparent Assessment, Alex typed, Subject D, Daniel. Natural rapport. Instinctive, non-transactional connection. Observed, Foreman Ray sharing personal grievance about healthcare. Subject D listened, offered no solution, only empathy. Result, Ray's posture opened, loyalty signal increased. Contrast with Subject M. Michael interactions are transactional, query-based. Subject D's value is cultural, not operational. Potential, Heir material. Milestone 4, the dual apprenticeship. Dorothy was in the middle of a grueling session on refrigeration unit logs when Alex approached, Daniel in tow. From today, Alex stated, he learns beside you. Dorothy stiffened, wiping grease from her hands onto her trousers. This is my apprenticeship, my grounding. A dynasty is not sustained by a single pillar, Alex replied, his voice leaving no room for debate. It requires a pair. You stood with your husband. He will stand with you. You learn the what and the why. He will learn the who and the how. To Dorothy's astonishment, Daniel didn't balk. He grabbed a spare clipboard. He asked questions, not corporate questions, but human ones. Why does this latch fail? Who fixes it best? How did your dad teach you this? Within days, he was climbing into crane cabs with operators, not to command, but to watch, to learn the dance of weight and wind. Alex's document grew. A subsection formed. Parallel training tracks, sovereign and successor. He outlined Dorothy's curriculum in blue, operations, finance, crisis management, and Daniel's in green, relationship mapping, cultural integration, leadership presence. He began filling the digital infrastructure of the compendium. Links to payroll systems annotated with notes on which employees were due for mentorship, maps of terminal infrastructure color-coded for upgrade priority, lists of digital tools that could bridge the gap between the dock floor and the boardroom. Milestone 5, the first test of loyalty. Crisis hit at dusk. A last-minute shipment for a high-priority client was mislabeled, its weight distribution off. The outbound vessel's loading window was closing. Dorothy scanned the manifest, her mind racing through protocols, but the specific technical fix eluded her. Daniel, who'd been listening to Ray complain about greenhorns who don't stagger by weight, just that morning, stepped forward. Ray, he said, calm, cutting through the panic. If we treat the two light containers as one unit and slot them between the heavies on the South Crane's run, wouldn't that balance the sequence? Ray stared, then a grin split his weathered face. Kid's got ears. He bellowed orders. The crane swung. Containers slid into place with newfound efficiency. The ship sailed on time. The men didn't cheer Dorothy. They clapped Daniel on the back. But in that clap, Alex saw it, the transfer of trust. The loyalty wasn't just to the family name, but to the person who spoke their language and solved their problem. In the compendium under succession catalyst events, Alex logged the incident. He added a note to the emerging 3-year stabilization plan. Phase 2, Month 8. Initiate Daniel's run. Assign subject D sole oversight of Terminal 7 weekend ops to cement operational credibility. Milestone 6, the shared flame. Weeks bled into months. Dorothy and Daniel became a fixture. Two figures in scuffed boots and worn jackets, clipboards in hand, one with the seasoned focus of a general, the other with the eager respect of a lieutenant. They shared the same tired smile at the end of a 14-hour day. Alex, watching from his now usual spot in the control booth, closed his tablet. The CEO's compendium and Heir's primer was no longer a skeleton. It was a living, breathing blueprint. It contained not just procedures, but philosophy. It had chapters on handling union negotiations, digital transformation timelines, profit-sharing models, to tie dock worker bonuses to company performance, and a 5-year projection that envisioned the Duran Group not just surviving, but dominating as a hybrid of muscle and data. The IRS audit landed like a thunderclap, not on the Duran Group's finances, but on the boardroom's fragile conspiracy. The letter, official and chilling, invoked a statutory freeze on all major governance changes pending its conclusion. Dorothy's call had not bought a month. It had bought a minimum of 6. The coup was paralyzed. Her CFO, Alan Riggs, stormed into her office, his face pale with a fury that bordered on panic. "This is reckless, Dorothy. Unnecessary exposure. You've invited wolves into the henhouse to scare off the foxes." Dorothy, who had spent the morning on Terminal 7's cold floor reviewing load times, merely looked up. "If the henhouse is clean, Alan, we have nothing to fear from wolves. Or foxes." Her calm was a weapon he didn't know how to parry. The audit was a surgical probe conducted with a cold, disinterested precision. It followed money trails with the patience of a spider, and it found rot. The first thread unraveled at a subsidiary, a series of inflated invoices for consulting services routed to a shell company. The signatory was one of the 3 board members who had submitted a resignation letter. The second thread was bolder: phantom payroll entries at a decommissioned logistics depot. The authorizing code belonged to the second resigning member. 2 out of the 3 would-be defectors had not been fleeing a failing company. They had been fleeing discovery, hoping their resignations would sever scrutiny of their departments. They had been embezzling for years, siphoning millions from the empire they pretended was dying. The board, once a chamber of murmurs and veiled threats, was now a theater of stunned silence and sweating brows. The emergency meeting called to discuss the audit crisis became a forced coronation. They looked at Dorothy with new eyes, not as a vulnerable widow, but as a ruthless strategist who had calmly baited a trap and let her enemies hang themselves with their own greed. A masterstroke, Dorothy, old man Pierce from legal rasped, a shade of genuine fear in his admiration. "To think you knew, to have the nerve to call them down on yourself just to expose them." Dorothy accepted the stunned praise with a grave nod, her face a mask of regal calculation. She did not correct them. She let the myth solidify. Only she knew the reality. That night, in the silent, empty vastness of Terminal 7, she found Alex. He was at the steel table under the hanging lamp, updating his eternal tablet, likely the compendium. The distant beep of a reversing loader was the only sound. "You knew," she said, her voice flat, not a question. Alex didn't look up. "I suspected." The pattern was there. Aggressive resistance to transparency, obsessive control over specific budget lines, a narrative of company decline that benefited them. It fit the profile of corruption more than principled opposition. The audit was a shield that also happened to be a magnet for metal. "You used me to swing an axe." Finally, he met her gaze. His eyes were clear, without triumph or guilt. "I gave you a tool. You chose to wield it. You cleansed your own court. That is not my victory, Mrs. Duran. It is yours. A queen does not merely defend her throne. She purges the treason from her halls." Now, he tapped the tablet. The kingdom is not only secure, it is sterilized. The loyalty of the remaining board is now rooted in fear and respect. A powerful combination. He turned the tablet toward her. On the screen was a new organizational chart. The 2 embezzlers' names were redacted, replaced by clean boxes. One was tentatively labeled Daniel Duran, Apprentice Director, Terminal Operations. "The path is clear," Alex said. "The old guard is broken. The heir is being groomed. The tribe's loyalty is shifting. The audit will conclude. And when it does, you will not return to the same boardroom. You will return to a crown that no one dares to challenge." Dorothy stared at the chart, at the name of her grandson in a box of potential power. She thought of the embezzlers, now facing federal charges. She thought of the awe in her colleagues' eyes. The Kingmaker had not just bought her time. He had handed her the executioner's blade, disguised as a shield, and allowed her legend to be written in the blood of her traitors. The game had changed. She was no longer playing defense. She was building a dynasty on the ashes of its betrayers. He had filled the blanks at a steady, relentless pace. By the end of his assignment, it wouldn't be a report. It would be the foundational scripture for the next generation. One evening, standing together as the terminal lights flickered on, Dorothy realized what had been built. Alex hadn't just trained a queen to reclaim her throne. He had quietly, masterfully positioned a knight. She looked at Daniel, no longer a boy in his grandfather's car, but a young man with the diesel scent of the empire in his pores and the loyalty of its heart in his hands. She was no longer alone. She had someone to stand beside her, as she had once stood beside Carlos. Across the yard, Alex shouldered his bag. The chessboard had shifted. The queen was no longer cornered. A knight now guarded her flank, and the Kingmaker, his latest kingdom secured, turned his eyes to the horizon, where the next broken ruler awaited their crown. The IRS audit landed like a thunderclap, not on the Duran Group's finances, but on the boardroom's fragile conspiracy. The letter, official and chilling, invoked a statutory freeze on all major governance changes pending its conclusion. Dorothy's call had not bought a month. It had bought a minimum of 6. The coup was paralyzed. Her CFO, Alan Riggs, stormed into her office, his face pale with a fury that bordered on panic. "This is reckless, Dorothy. Unnecessary exposure. You've invited wolves into the hen house to scare off the foxes." Dorothy, who had spent the morning on Terminal 7's cold floor reviewing load times, merely looked up. "If the hen house is clean, Alan, we have nothing to fear from wolves. Or foxes." Her calm was a weapon he didn't know how to parry. The audit was a surgical probe conducted with a cold, disinterested precision. It followed money trails with the patience of a spider, and it found rot. The first thread unraveled at a subsidiary, a series of inflated invoices for consulting services routed to a shell company. The signatory was one of the 3 board members who had submitted a resignation letter. The second thread was bolder, phantom payroll entries at a decommissioned logistics depot. The authorizing code belonged to the second resigning member. 2 out of the 3 would-be defectors had not been fleeing a failing company. They had been fleeing discovery, hoping their resignations would sever scrutiny of their departments. They had been embezzling for years, siphoning millions from the empire they pretended was dying. The board, once a chamber of murmurs and veiled threats, was now a theater of stunned silence and sweating brows. The emergency meeting called to discuss the audit crisis became a forced coronation. They looked at Dorothy with new eyes, not as a vulnerable widow, but as a ruthless strategist who had calmly baited a trap and let her enemies hang themselves with their own greed. A masterstroke, Dorothy, old man Pierce from Legal rasped, a shade of genuine fear in his admiration. "To think you knew, to have a nerve to call them down on yourself, just to expose them." Dorothy accepted the stunned praise with a grave nod, her face a mask of regal calculation. She did not correct them. She let the myth solidify. Only she knew the reality. That night, in the silent, empty vastness of Terminal 7, she found Alex. He was at the steel table under the hanging lamp, updating his eternal tablet, likely the compendium. The distant beep of a reversing loader was the only sound. "You knew," she said, her voice flat, not a question. Alex didn't look up. "I suspected." The pattern was there. Aggressive resistance to transparency, obsessive control over specific budget lines, a narrative of company decline that benefited them. It fit the profile of corruption more than principled opposition. The audit was a shield that also happened to be a magnet for metal. "You used me to swing an axe." Finally, he met her gaze. His eyes were clear, without triumph or guilt. "I gave you a tool. You chose to wield it. You cleansed your own court. That is not my victory, Mrs. Duran. It is yours. A queen does not merely defend her throne. She purges the treason from her halls." Now, he tapped the tablet. The kingdom is not only secure, it is sterilized. The loyalty of the remaining board is now rooted in fear and respect. A powerful combination. He turned the tablet toward her. On the screen was a new organizational chart. The 2 embezzlers' names were redacted, replaced by clean boxes. One was tentatively labeled Daniel Duran, Apprentice Director, Terminal Operations. "The path is clear," Alex said. "The old guard is broken. The heir is being groomed. The tribe's loyalty is shifting. The audit will conclude, and when it does, you will not return to the same boardroom." You will return to a crown that no one dares to challenge. Dorothy stared at the chart, at the name of her grandson in a box of potential power. She thought of the embezzlers, now facing federal charges. She thought of the awe in her colleagues' eyes. The Kingmaker had not just bought her time. He had handed her the executioner's blade, disguised as a shield, and allowed her legend to be written in the blood of her traitors. The game had changed. She was no longer playing defense. She was building a dynasty on the ashes of its betrayers. Now for a word from our station. The best comeback isn't an apology. It's a perfectly executed narrative flip. Craving stories where the underdog is a secret genius? At Novella Station, we've got you. Subscribe and don't forget to comment your thoughts. Chapter 7. The Shadow of a Legend. The offices of Fisk, Holden, and Green were a temple of hushed, expensive calm. The air smelled of lemonwood polish and resolved disputes. In a conference room with a view of the financial district's granite canyons, Alex Maxim sat, not as a client, but as an asset. Across from him, Arthur Fisk had been joined by a lean, sharp-eyed man in his 50s, Simon Croft, the firm's managing director of private client services. Mr. Maxim, Croft began, opening a discreet leather portfolio. Following the successful conclusion and substantial profit realization from the Duran engagement, your liquid balance has reached a threshold where inefficiency becomes a cost. We're looking at a significant tax event. He slid a proposal across the table. We recommend establishing a family office structure, a series of nested LLCs for your consulting entity, a separate investment vehicle for your accumulated capital, and a charitable foundation for strategic philanthropy, which offers excellent optics and further shelter. We can deploy capital into a conservative, diversified portfolio, private equity, real estate, municipal bonds. The goal is preservation, steady growth, and utmost privacy. Alex scanned the documents. They were elegant cages, designed to make wealth invisible and untouchable. He gave a slight nod. Proceed. I'll review the allocations quarterly. Wise, Croft said, making a note. It's about building a fortress, not just a bank account. It was then that old Mr. Holden, the firm's founding partner, a man with veins like rivers on the back of his hands and eyes that had seen every kind of secret, entered quietly. He dismissed Croft with a glance. Alex, he said, settling into a chair with a soft sigh. He poured himself a cup of tea from his service on the table, his movements deliberate. The Duran matter concluded cleanly, more than cleanly. It was surgical. That was the agreement, Alex replied, sipping his own tea. It was Earl Grey, steaming and precise. Indeed, Holden took a slow sip, his gaze steady over the rim of the china cup. Agreements, however, exist between parties. Legends do not. They spread in the groundwater. He set his cup down with a soft click. In certain circles, the kind that orbit old money, distressed empires, and desperate heirs, there's talk. A failing restaurant chain turned into a cultural phenomenon. A widowed logistics matriarch who not only fended off a boardroom coup, but orchestrated the criminal downfall of her opponents while profits soared. 2 miracles in 3 years. And both clients were, briefly, seen in the company of a facilitator, a man known only by a color. Alex's expression didn't change. He watched the steam curl from his tea. People like stories. They prefer them to the messy truth of hard work and outdated systems. They do, Holden agreed. And the story they are telling is of a phantom, a kingmaker. Most dismiss it as a hoax, a convenient narrative for lucky turnarounds. But a few are starting to pay very close attention. They're not looking for a consultant. They're looking for a ghost who can perform resurrections. The silence stretched, filled with the weight of the unspoken threat. Recognition was the antithesis of the Kingmaker's rules. Finally, Alex placed his cup on its saucer. The sound was clean, final. Ghosts, Mr. Holden, are defined by their ability to vanish. He looked out the window at the city, a sprawling chessboard of ambition and ruin. If the whispers become shouts, if the shadows get too thin, I can always pack a bag. There are other cities, other kingdoms always in need of crown. He said it with a calm that was more chilling than any fear. It wasn't a contingency plan. It was a statement of identity. The Kingmaker was not a person with a life to uproot. He was a function, and a function could be relocated. Holden studied him, a mix of professional admiration and personal unease flickering in his aged eyes. He saw no attachment, no fear, no pride, only a pure, operational calculus. Alex wasn't threatening to run. He was simply stating a logistical fact. A prudent philosophy, Holden said quietly. We will, of course, enhance our layers of discretion. The family office structure will help. But legends, they have a momentum of their own. Just be aware, Alex. You are building more than fortunes for your clients. You are building a myth. And myths are harder to control than money. Alex stood, smoothing his jacket. The meeting was over. Myths require believers, Mr. Holden. I deal in results. Let them believe what they want. As long as they can't find me to thank me or to blame me, the legend is harmless. He gave a slight, polite nod and left the conference room, a solitary figure disappearing into the firm's plush, silent halls. Holden remained, staring at the closed door, then at the two empty teacups. One from the young man who had just casually discussed abandoning a life that was, by any measure, becoming formidable. He thought of the whispers, the hungry curiosity growing in dark-paneled rooms across the city. The boy was right. A myth without a face was just a ghost story. But Holden knew something Alex, in his crystalline focus, might have discounted. The most dangerous people weren't the disbelievers. They were the true believers. And they would move the silence in the conference room after Alex's departure was profound. Mr. Holden did not move for a long moment. He reached out and carefully aligned Alex's empty saucer with his own, a small, fastidious gesture that belied the tumult in his mind. From his inner pocket, he withdrew a slim, old-fashioned phone, dialing a number from memory. Simon, he said when his managing director answered. Regarding the Maxim structures, add 2 additional discretionary trusts in the Cayman ladder. Route the charitable foundation's proposed donations through the Swiss NGO conduit we established for the Viennese family. I want his financial footprint to be a hall of mirrors before the first dollar of the Duran proceeds even lands. He listened to the brief affirmation on the other end. And Simon? Prioritize the liquidity. Ensure a significant portion remains in assets that can be moved within 24 hours. Not because he'll need to, Holden added, his voice dropping, but because the option must be pristine. He ended the call. The law was his craft, but contingency was his religion. Alex saw the board. Holden saw the entire precarious table. His assistant's voice came softly over the intercom. Mr. Holden? A Ms. Vance on line 2. She says it's regarding a family matter. She was quite insistent. Holden's eyes closed briefly. Vance, the actress, Marissa Vance. Her face was on bus stops and magazine covers. And years ago, her name had been in a confidential memorandum prepared for a young, heartbroken Alex Maxim, back when the firm had handled the simpler, sadder matter of a non-disclosure agreement following a painful personal dissolution. The threads were beginning to vibrate. Put her through, he said, his voice gravelly with a weariness that had nothing to do with age. Mr. Holden, a smooth, cultured voice came on the line, laced with a publicist's charm and a private, steel core. Forgive the direct approach. I'm looking for someone. A ghost, you might say. I believe your firm might have facilitated his work for an acquaintance of mine in the restaurant business. A Greg Williams. Holden's face was a placid mask. Client confidentiality, Ms. Vance, is the cornerstone of this firm. I'm sure you understand. Of course, she purred undeterred. Let's not speak of clients, then. Let's speak of patterns, of miracles. I find myself in need of a particular kind of miracle, Mr. Holden. A career, like a business, can sometimes need a turnaround, a strategic redirection. The whisper I hear is that there is a man who specializes in crafting second acts. I would very much like an introduction. The world is full of talented strategists and publicists, Ms. Vance. I could recommend several. I don't want a strategist, she said, the charm evaporating, leaving something cold and desperate underneath. I want the architect, the one who doesn't just manage a story, but rebuilds the entire narrative. Name your price for a meeting. Holden thought of Alex, minutes gone, calmly sipping tea and discussing the portability of his own existence. The legend was no longer seeping. It was knocking, with a famous face and a pocket full of cash. "There is no price for what does not exist, Ms. Vance," Holden said, his tone allowing no argument. "I suggest you look to the tangible resources available to you. Good day." He severed the connection before she could reply. For a long time, he stared at the cityscape. The chessboard was shifting, and a piece he had not accounted for, a pawn from Alex's own past, now a queen in her own right, had just made an opening move. He drafted a brief, encrypted message to Alex's secure server, a channel used only for extreme contingencies. It contained 2 lines. Inquiry received William success. Source, MV. Recommend, operational pause. Deepen cover. He did not expect a reply. Alex would either heed the warning or he wouldn't. The Kingmaker operated by his own rules. But as Holden finally rose from the table, he felt the first cold trickle of a truth he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. You could build walls around a fortune and doors for a ghost. But a legend was a mist. It seeped through everything, and someone, somewhere was always waiting to breathe it in. Quick promo break. We don't do easy glow-ups. We do grueling, bone-deep reinventions. If you like your redemption earned with sweat and strategy, you're at the right channel. Subscribe for more. Chapter 8, the second act. Richard Wong had laughed when Greg Williams first slid the black metal card across the table at their club. It was absurd, childish even. A single word in gold, Kingmaker, engraved like a magician's trick. On the back, only a number. "You're kidding me, Greg. This is your savior? A metal business card?" Greg hadn't laughed. He just finished a 12-course tasting menu at the 9th pleat, and his calm was unnerving. "I'm lending it to you, Richard. Not giving it. You'll return it when you've seen what it does. Or when you've decided you'd rather drown." Richard pocketed the card to be polite. But that was before the police raid footage leaked from his most exclusive club, Elysium. Before the sponsors fled. Before the headlines shifted from Nightlife King to Tarnished Crown. The card, heavy and ridiculous, began to feel like the only solid thing in his dissolving world. He dialed the number. The voice that answered was calm. "Mr. Wong, tomorrow, 9 p.m., the loft address will be sent. Come alone." The loft was a raw, cavernous space, exposed brick, steel beams, concrete floor. A single pendant lamp cast a stark pool of light onto a steel table with 2 chairs. Richard stepped inside. Alex was already there, a silhouette against the dark. He didn't rise. "Sit." Richard sat. The silence was a physical weight. "Horizon Entertainment is not dying because of scandal," Alex began, his voice flat, diagnostic. "Scandal is the symptom. The disease is irrelevance. You built an empire on exclusive access. The world has moved on. The scandal just turned the lights on in an empty room." Richard flinched. "We've hired the best crisis PR. They say apologize, donate, lay low. PR firms manage decay," Alex stated. "I architect rebirth. Apologizing is for people who did something wrong. You didn't do anything your competitors haven't done. You just got caught. So we won't apologize. We will pivot. Horizon ceases to be a nightlife and events company. What? It's all we have. It's all you had. Now it's a liability. Horizon becomes a production studio, a streaming microplatform, a curator of underground, visceral storytelling." Richard stared. "We have no infrastructure, no credibility in film." "You have something better," Alex said, a cold, sharp light in his eyes. "You have notoriety, a brand synonymous with edge, with the illicit. We will monetize that whisper. Your first project won't be a period drama. It will be a hyper-stylized noir series set in the world of exclusive clubs, based on the experiences of Horizon founder Richard Wong. We won't hide from the scandal. We will weaponize it." He leaned forward. "You don't wait out a scandal. You transform it into your origin story. In 6 months, you won't be the tarnished king. You'll be the reclusive auteur. 6 months. 6 months to premiere the first teaser and secure distribution. This is a short, intensive engagement. My fee is 30% of the profits generated by the new ventures I create, or $30 million, whichever is less. Full strategic authority, and you will know me only as Mr. Gray. Richard's eyes widened. 30% of profit or a 30 million cap. It was still a king's ransom, but the cap made it fathomable, a calculated risk rather than open-ended piracy. It acknowledged the scale. He thought of Greg Williams, standing in the ruins of his restaurant, now presiding over an empire. He picked up the stylus. He signed. Alex stood, handed him a card similar to one that's resting in his pocket. Return Greg's card to him. It was a loan, not a gift. The transaction is between you and him. My work begins now. He turned and walked into the darkness beyond the circle of light. The sign tablet was less a contract and more a digital handshake. The real binding weight arrived at Richard's penthouse the next morning, delivered by a courier in the discreet livery of Fisk, Holden, and Green. The envelope was heavy, cream-colored, and exact. Inside, the agreement was a masterpiece of legal architecture. Hundreds of pages that formalized the insane gamble of the night before into cold, enforceable clauses. The 30% profit share or $30 million cap was there, embedded in dense, perfect legalese. The scope of Alex's authority was delineated with terrifying precision. As Richard stared at the signature page, his phone rang. A number he didn't recognize. Mr. Wong. Arthur Fisk. I trust you received the execution documents for the Kingmaker consulting engagement. Richard was stunned. Fisk, Holden, and Green weren't just a top firm. They were the firm for old money empires and silent, powerful trusts. Ah, yes. I have them. Excellent. My role is to ensure the smooth execution of the agreement on behalf of the service provider. Please initial pages 17, 43, 89, and 112 and sign where indicated on the final execution page. A courier will collect them within the hour. The man's voice was like polished granite, professional, immovable, and utterly aligned with the phantom, Mr. Gray. Mr. Fisk, Richard ventured, a sudden, desperate need for reassurance overtaking him. This man, Mr. Gray, you've worked with him before. There was the briefest pause, not of hesitation, but of measured discretion. The firm represents the interests of Kingmaker Consulting, LLC. Our client's results, as I understand, speak for themselves. The Williams Heritage Group and the Duran Group restructuring are both matters of public record regarding their remarkable transformations. He said no more, but the message was clear. The law firm wasn't just a hired gun. They were an ally, a pillar of the establishment that had lent its formidable credibility to the myth. It made the whole proposition feel less like a deal with a shadow and more like an initiation into a very exclusive, very real consortium. Richard initialed and signed. The courier arrived and left with the documents. An hour later, a text arrived from the burner number. Mr. Gray, the cinematographer, Derek Voss, will meet you at the Old Horizon warehouse on Pier 62 at 3 p.m. He knows the script. Listen to him. The first scene is always the most important. Richard looked at the text, then out at the city. The panic was gone, replaced by a focused, almost warlike clarity. He wasn't just following a strategist. He was being orchestrated by an entity with its own gravity, its own allies, its own rules. The Kingmaker wasn't just a man. He was a system, and Richard Wong was now a component within it. The Old Horizon warehouse on Pier 62 smelled of salt, rotting wood, and forgotten ambition. Richard stood in the vast, empty space, sunlight cutting through broken windows in dusty shafts. It was a tomb for a version of his empire that was already dead. At precisely 3 p.m., a side door creaked open. Derek Voss entered, not like a Hollywood player, but like a welder arriving for a shift. He wore stained cargo pants, a faded flannel, and carried a battered leather satchel. His face was a roadmap of hard living. A broken nose, deep crow's feet, but eyes that were shockingly alert, missing nothing. Wong, Voss said by way of greeting, his voice a gravelly rumble. He didn't offer a hand. He dropped his satchel on the concrete floor with a thud. Gray says you want to make something real, or you want to die trying. Which is it? The bluntness was a shock. I want to rebuild, Richard said, forcing authority into his voice. Voss snorted. Rebuild? This? He gestured at the decaying warehouse. This is perfect. This is the set. The first project isn't a script he sent you. It's this. He pulled a handheld digital camera from his satchel, a professional, high-end model, but small, intimate. We start shooting a documentary. Today. Right now. Richard blinked. A documentary? About what? About the death of Horizon Entertainment, Voss said, lifting the camera and powering it on. A tiny red light glowed. About you. Standing in the corpse of your dream. Talking about the raid, the fear, the free fall. No PR spin. No lawyers vetting it. Just you in the ruins, telling the truth. That's insane, Richard breathed. That's handing my enemies the knife. Your enemies already have the knife, Voss countered, not lowering the camera. They're carving you up in the press every day. This isn't handing them the knife. This is you taking the knife and performing surgery on yourself on live TV. It's the only thing they can't weaponize because you're doing it first. Authenticity, Wong. It's the only currency left that nobody in this town can fake. He took a step closer, the lens focusing. Gray's plan isn't a series based on your experiences. Phase 1 is showing your experience. Raw, ugly, and real. We release it in 3 parts on a guerrilla streaming channel. We call it the deconstruction. By the end of it, the public doesn't see a scandal-plagued playboy. They see an artist staring into the abyss. And then, a grim, knowing smile touched Voss's lips. Phase 2 begins. We show them what you build out of the abyss. The narrative shifts from fall from grace to phoenix from the ashes. But you gotta burn first. Richard stood frozen, the camera's red, light as Cyclops, eye judging him. This was the opposite of every instinct he had, every lesson from a lifetime of crafting an image. It was professional suicide. But then he heard Alex's voice in his head. You don't wait out a scandal. You transform it into your origin story. This was the transformation, not a spin, a stripping bare. He took a shaky breath, ran a hand through his hair, and looked around the derelict warehouse, the physical manifestation of his failure. Where do you want me? Richard Wong asked, his voice barely a whisper. Right where you are, Voss said, the camera whirring softly. Now, tell me why this place used to matter, and why it doesn't anymore. Start with the truth. The rest is just editing. Across the city, in the silent loft, Alex received a 2-word encrypted text from Derek Voss. Voss, he's in. Alex didn't reply. He was studying a new dossier on his tablet. At the top, it read, Client Dossier Number 4, Julian Vance. Below, a tabloid headline. From box office gold to box office old. Can the Vance charm survive another flop? The Kingmaker's work was a relay race. One client's desperate pivot was about to fund another's resurrection. He closed the dossier. Richard Wong was in the crucible. The narrative was being seized. Phase 1 had begun. The finished documentary, Deconstruction, wasn't released. It was strategically leaked onto a niche film forum known for its brutal tastemaker audience. The first clip, 3 minutes of Richard Wong staring at the rain-smeared window of his silent penthouse, appeared with no title, no context. Within an hour, it had migrated to Twitter. The commentary was a firing squad. At Film Snob Elite. Is this the world's most expensive screen test for a depression medication? Hashtag deconstruction, hashtag Wong fail. At Club Culture Z. Mayo, remember when this guy charged $5,000 for a bottle? Now he's giving us this bottle of tears for free. At Media Maven, this isn't a comeback strategy. This is a suicide note filmed by a cinematographer. Richard sat in a darkened editing bay with Derek Voss, watching the real-time carnage on a second monitor. His knuckles were white. This is a disaster. They're eating me alive. Voss didn't look away from his color grading screen. They're talking. Yesterday, you were a footnote on a police blotter. Today, your topic. Gray said to let them chew. The taste will change. Alex, monitoring from his loft, saw the analytics shift. The mockery was universal, but the engagement metrics were astronomical. The audience wasn't just dismissing it, they were dissecting it. Podcasts were recording hot takes. YouTube reaction videos were cropping up. Deconstruction was no longer a piece of content. It was a cultural petri dish. He summoned Richard to the loft. The audience is engaged, Alex stated, pointing to a graph on his tablet. They are in the contempt phase of the relationship cycle. We will now move them to curiosity. Ow! By having me set myself on fire in part 2. Richard snapped, his composure frayed. By showing them the arsonist, not just the fire, Alex replied calmly. Part 2 focuses on your past successes. Not the clubs, the early web series, midnight vendors that everyone copied. The indie film you financed that launched a director's career. We remind them you were once a tastemaker, not just a party host. We reframe your fall as a tragedy of lost vision, not just a moral failure. The second leak dropped. The commentary shifted fractionally. At Cinema Sleuth, okay, wait. I forgot he produced Vendors. That show was legit. This is actually getting interesting. A portrait of squandered talent. At Deep Focus Pod, episode 42 drops tomorrow. The two Richards, visionary producer versus nightlife clown. As the documentary built its strange, grim audience, Alex moved on the financial front. He set a meeting with Richard and the three remaining angels from his last failed series, Neon Ghosts. They were skeptical, ready to cut their losses. The documentary is building an audience of influencers and industry watchers, Alex told them in Richard's office. That audience is primed for a meta-narrative, a story about the man making the documentary about his fall. I am proposing that audience pre-funds his rise. He laid out the plan for The Last Bottle, a 6-episode limited series, blending scripted drama with the documentary's verite footage. It was high-risk, bizarre, and utterly unique. One investor, a tech mogul named Landon, scoffed. You want us to double down on a sinking ship based on internet comments? Not based on comments, Alex said, his voice cutting through the doubt. Based on conviction. I am so convinced of this vision that I will personally invest $2 million into the production. Not as a fee, as a stake. My money beside yours. He slid a term sheet across the table, showing his own capital injection at a preferential return rate, but subordinate to the Angels' principle. I have skin in the game. This is not a consultancy. This is a partnership with a vision. The room fell silent. Richard stared at Alex. This was unheard of. The Kingmaker was betting on his own blueprint with his own money. Landon leaned back, a new light in his eyes. You're putting your cash in? My capital is on the line, Alex confirmed. The documentary is the marketing engine. This series is the product. We are not asking for faith in Richard. We are asking for faith in the narrative. And I'm buying the first chapter. That commitment broke the logjam. With Alex's money as a seal, the Angels agreed to a reduced but sufficient round of funding. The streaming platform, seeing the built-in audience and the unconventional financing, came on board for distribution. The production was a whirlwind. Richard, now repackaged from disgraced club king to complex, flawed auteur, gave interviews that were raw extensions of the documentary's tone. He didn't promote, he confessed. I got lost in the glow of my own sign, he told a popular culture podcaster. I'm trying to find my way back in the dark with a camera. When The Last Bottle premiered, it didn't feel like a TV show. It felt like a cultural event. The audience that had grown from mockery to curiosity now surged into embrace. At the Take, The Last Bottle is a masterpiece. It's the show deconstruction was desperate to become. Richard Wong didn't just make a series. He lived its thesis. At Vanity Fair, from pariah to prophet, the unlikely rebranding of Richard Wong. The finale aired to record numbers. Richard Wong was no longer a joke. He was a case study. His production company was inundated with pitches for dark, authentic, meta-narrative projects. His failure was now his brand. In the final meeting, Richard handed Alex a data pad showing the profit statements and the triggered wire transfer for Alex's share of the profits, plus the return of his $2 million stake with its agreed premium. You got your money back. With interest, Richard said. I expected to, Alex replied, taking the pad. The investment was never the risk. Your willingness to be dismantled was the risk. You pay that price. Richard nodded toward the window, beyond which the city glittered, including the still-shuttered Elysium. What about the club? A relic, Alex said, gathering his things. Your credibility is no longer tied to a door policy. It's tied to a point of view. Sell the space. Let it become someone else's dream. You're in the business of stories now, not bottle service. He placed Greg Williams's black metal card on the desk between them. Return this. Your transaction with that chapter is complete. As Alex left, Richard picked up the card. It felt different now. Not a lifeline, but a receipt for a transformation that had been as brutal as it was brilliant. He looked at the muted TV in his office, where Entertainment News Channel was analyzing the Wong rebrand. He didn't see a king anymore. He saw what Alex had always seen, a foundational piece in a larger legend. And he knew exactly who to call next. Now for a word from our station. The best comeback isn't an apology. It's a perfectly executed narrative flip. Craving stories where the underdog is a secret genius? We've got you. Subscribe. Chapter 9, From Charm to Harm. Julian Croft's mansion in the Hollywood Hills felt less like a home and more like a meticulously preserved museum exhibit titled Faded Stardom. Richard Wong's introduction had been a warning wrapped in a promise. He's the only one who can retool you. You'll call him Mr. White. Now, Julian sat across from Alex, the relentless sun highlighting every fine line on a face that had once been insured for millions. Richard said you perform miracles, Julian began, the charm in his voice now a well-worn tool he wasn't sure still worked. But my miracle needs to be physical. I need them to see me differently. Alex placed the black metal card on the glass table. Kingmaker. They don't see you at all, Julian. They see a watermark of who you were. A golden boy tint on a fading print. We will not ask them to look closer. We will give them something new and undeniable to look at. He turned his tablet around. On screen was a split view. On one side, a still from Julian's most famous romantic comedy, all twinkling eyes and perfect hair. On the other, a gritty, pause frame from a Korean noir film showing a weathered, formidable older actor in a brutal, silent fight scene. Your image is your prison. We are not renovating the cell. We are tunneling out. With sledgehammers. Julian leaned in, his attention caught. Ow! You will disappear from the scene. No premieres, no industry panels, no nostalgic podcast interviews. Total ghosting. In your absence, we will create a new reality. Alex pulled up a production schedule. Phase 1, the forging. You will be placed with Kale, a tactical fitness coach who trains military and elite athletes. His regimen is not for aesthetics. It's for functional, violent capability. This process will be documented not for a documentary, but for evidence. Evidence for who? For the niche that matters, Alex said. Action directors, stunt coordinators, the people who value physical truth over movie star sheen. We will leak raw, unbranded clips. No context. Just Croft, sparring drill 12 or Croft, endurance hold, minute 4. We target specialized forums, martial arts channels, followings of respected fight choreographers. The goal is not public buzz. It is industry whisper, a growing rumor that Julian Croft is being rebuilt from the ground up into something dangerous. He advanced the presentation. Phase 2, the craft. Once your base is transformed, you will begin intensive training with a legendary, retired fight choreographer, someone like Master Lin. We leak these clips. Short, stunning sequences of you executing precise, complex fight choreography. The message isn't the proficiency. The caption is always the same. Work in progress. Julian was nodding slowly, a spark of the old fire returning, but colder, harder. This is a long road. A year, maybe more. It is a permanent pivot, Alex corrected. Therefore, the engagement is open-ended until you book the role that redefines you. My fee is 30% of your earnings from all sources for the next 5 years, beginning with the first project that results from this transformation. Julian's eyebrows shot up. 30%? For 5 years? That's a partner, not a consultant. It is the price of a second career, Alex said, his voice leaving no room for sentiment. This is not a quick fix. It is a total retooling of your professional body and brand. I will be funding the entire operational front to make it happen. The trainers, the choreographers, the safe house gym, the digital campaign, all paid from my pocket. My capital at risk to rebuild your value. The 30% is the return on that investment. It aligns our fates perfectly. Your success is my only profit. He let the magnitude of the gamble hang in the air. Alex wasn't just advising. He was bankrolling the resurrection. And I need you insulated from the machinery, Alex continued. You will have 2 handlers paid by me. One, a digital strategist to manage the leak campaign and build the new narrative in the right corners of the internet. The other, a young, relentless business affairs agent who will take the evidence we create and use it to get you meetings no traditional agent could, with directors who value physical authenticity over box office names. Julian stared at the contract terms on the tablet. It was the most audacious, all-encompassing deal he had ever seen. It wasn't a service contract, it was a merger. You're betting on me with your own money? Julian asked, incredulous. I'm betting on my own process, Alex clarified. And my process requires total control of the inputs. Your only job is to suffer, transform, and be ready when the right door opens. My team and my capital will ensure the door is not only opened, but that you're the only logical choice to walk through it. He pushed the tablet forward. This is the catalyst. Sign it, and tomorrow you begin the rest of your life as someone new. Refuse, and you can continue to be the ghost of Golden Boy past until the last fan forgets your name. Julian Croft picked up the stylus. His hand was steady. For the first time in years, the path forward was not a gentle decline, but a steep, brutal, upward climb. He signed. Alex stood. Kale will be here at 0500. He does not respect pronouns, only push-ups. The digital strategist, Eliza, will contact you this evening to film your first session. The business agent, Leo, will begin compiling your proof of concept reel next month. He left Julian sitting in the sun, the signed contract glowing on the table, the black metal car beside it. The Kingmaker had just become the primary investor in a human startup, Julian Croft 2.0. The fee was unprecedented, the control absolute. But for a king with a crumbling castle, even a ruthless architect is a savior. The long, hard work of building a new king had begun. Quick promo break. And Novella Station don't do easy glow-ups. We build characters who do grueling, bone-deep reinventions. And their redemption earned with sweat and strategy. You're at the right channel, folks. Subscribe for more. Chapter 10. The Hunt for the Run. The silence of Alex's workroom was broken only by the whisper of a climate control system and the soft tap of keystrokes. 4 or 5 months, Julian Croft had been in the forge, his life reduced to pre-dawn workouts with Kale, brutal fight choreography with Master Lin, and a strict monastic diet. The leaked clips were doing their work, a quiet, growing hum in the dark corners of film forums and stunt coordinator group chats. Is this for real? The form is legit. Never thought I'd say it, but Croft looks dangerous. But physical transformation was only half the equation. A weapon needed a target, and Alex would not leave the selection of Julian's comeback vehicle to chance, to the whims of Hollywood's fickle gatekeepers. He operated on 2 fronts. The first was data. Using a shell consultancy set up through Fisk, Holden and Green, and fronted by Richard Wong's newly minted Horizon Pictures credibility, Alex commissioned the largest, most granular audience sentiment survey the industry had never seen. It didn't ask about stars or genres. It asked about itches. What moral ambiguity did viewers crave? What professions felt unexplored? What betrayals cut the deepest? He cross-referenced this with torrent traffic on piracy sites, a brutally honest metric of true demand, and semantic analysis of millions of comments on thriller and action forums. He wasn't looking for a trend. He was looking for a hunger not yet fed. The second front was the source material. Using Richard's name and a non-disclosure agreement so severe, it was a work of legal art. Alex gained access to the slush piles and blind submission portals of 3 major writers' associations and 2 prestigious screenplay competitions. He wasn't looking for polished, studio-ready scripts. He was looking for raw, ugly, brilliant cores. Stories deemed too small, too bleak, or too complicated for the mainstream machine. Nights bled into days as he consumed thousands of pages. He read log lines for cyborg romances and superhero deconstructions, dismissing them. He sought a specific alchemy, a grounded world, a morally compromised everyman, a twist that was emotionally devastating, not just clever. A story where the action emerged from character, not the other way around. The breakthrough came at 3:17 a.m. on a Wednesday. It was a manuscript buried in the unproduced archive of a now-defunct noir writing collective. The title was workmanlike, The Run. The logline was deceptively simple. An armored car guard, counting the days to a quiet retirement, discovers his meticulously planned final route is the target of a heist. The mastermind is his wife. Alex read it in one sitting. It wasn't just a heist story. It was a marriage story, dissected with the precision of a thriller. The action was claustrophobic, set in the steel womb of the money van and the quiet, ticking bomb of a suburban home. The protagonist, Mike, wasn't a warrior. He was a tired, dutiful man whose expertise was procedure and vigilance, not violence. The physical challenge would be reactive, desperate, born of betrayal rather than prowess. It was perfect. It was also, as the attached rejection letters showed, considered too downbeat, lacking a franchise spine, and uncastable with its demand for a lead who was over 45 and genuinely ordinary before becoming extraordinary. Alex closed the manuscript. He saw it instantly. The gritty, rain-slick streets. The cold, procedural tension of the van's routine. The seismic, intimate betrayal. And Julian Croft, not as a charming star, but as Mike, his new, hardened physique hidden under a security uniform, his famous face aged by stress and heartbreak, the golden boy utterly, irrevocably shattered. The physical training would pay off not in superheroics, but in the credible, grueling struggle of a man fighting for his life and his broken past. He drafted 2 emails. The first was to the manuscript's author, a reclusive writer named Silas Graft, offering an option buy through a blind LLC for a sum that would make him weep, with a back-end percentage that would ensure his loyalty. The second was to his newly installed business agent for Julian, Leo, package secured. The Run. Graft. Mid-7-figure budget. Need director. Someone who does nervous system filmmaking, not set pieces. Find me the European director who did Transit. He understands dread. Attach Croft as Mike. Use the transformation reel as Exhibit A. Finance through the Luxembourg Fund from the Durand deal. This is not a pitch. It is a fait accompli. Present it as such. He leaned back. The weapon was forged. The target was acquired. The Kingmaker had not waited for Hollywood to offer Julian Croft a role. He had reverse-engineered the perfect role from the audience's subconscious hunger and was now assembling the entire project from the ground up, like a bespoke suit. Julian's 30% future was now irrevocably tied to a movie that, until this moment, had existed only in a forgotten digital drawer and the ruthless calculus of Alex Maxim's mind. The long-term assignment had its blueprint. The real work, the war of finance, attachments, and production was about to begin. Securing the manuscript for The Run was only the first move. Now Alex needed to build an unassailable fortress around it. A production so tightly packaged that its success felt inevitable, and its lead actor, Julian Croft, felt irreplaceable. This required capital and creative control, both of which he intended to secure outside the traditional, meddling Hollywood system. His first call was to Richard Wong. "Richard, I need you to read something." Alex sent the manuscript to him through a secure server. 24 hours later, Richard called back, his voice charged with the energy of a producer who'd just found a diamond in the rough. "This is it. This is the exact thing we said Horizon Pictures would do. Gritty, authentic, morally complex." "How much?" "Budget is pinned at $25 million, Alex said. "I need you to anchor it. A commitment of $10 million for a 40% stake. Your name as a producer gets us credibility. Your money gets us off the ground." There was a pause on the line, not of hesitation, but of calculation. Richard was no longer the desperate man from the warehouse. He was a player assessing a bet. 10 for 40 is steep for an uncast, undirected package. It's not uncast. It's Julian Croft, and his transformation reel will be part of the pitch. It's not undirected. I have a target. Your money isn't buying a script. It's buying a piece of the engine I'm building. It's buying a continuation of the narrative you started. That horizon backs bold, authentic stories. This is the definitive proof. Another pause. Send me the business plan. The projections. I'm in, but I need to see the architecture. It's already on its way. The second call was higher stakes. Dorothy Duran answered on the first ring, her voice still carrying the grounded authority of the docs. Mr. Red, to what do I owe the pleasure? Terminal 7 is running smoother than my boardroom these days. I have an opportunity, Mrs. Duran. A venture outside logistics. A film. He heard the soft rustle of fabric, could picture her sitting straighter in her chair. Hollywood? That's a fickle ocean. My ships prefer predictable currents. This isn't a Hollywood film. It's an asset, one with a defined risk profile and a potential return that outpaces even your best-performing routes. I've secured the property, the lead actor, and a cornerstone investor. I need another $10 million to secure the final piece, a director with a specific, uncompromising vision. This gives you a 40% stake alongside Richard Wong's Horizon Pictures. The line was quiet for a long moment. You're asking me to gamble on movies. I'm asking you to gamble on me, Alex said, his voice utterly flat. The same way you did in Terminal 7. The industry is irrelevant. The package, the strategy, and my oversight are the assets. You are not betting on Hollywood. You are betting on the Kingmaker's process being vertically integrated. He expected skepticism, a demand for details. Instead, Dorothy Duran let out a short, dry laugh. I gambled on you once with my life's work. A few million from the corporate coffers seems like a lighter bet. Her tone turned serious. When do you need the commitment? Within the week. Consider it done. Send the paperwork to Fisk and Holden. I'll have my people look it over. She paused. And Alex, don't make me regret proving Greg Williams right about you being a worthwhile referral. The funding was locked. 20 million committed, 80% of the budget secured from two allies whose trust he'd earned not with charm, but with results. It was intrusion-free capital. They were betting on the architect, not the blueprints. Now, for the final, crucial piece, the director. Alex's research rejected the usual suspects of gritty thrillers. Their styles were known, their instincts softened by the system. He needed a surgeon. He found her in the filmography of international festivals, Maya Thorne. She had only 2 features to her name. The second, The Thin Blue Lineage, was a blistering, clinically detailed indie based on the true story of a policewoman systematically broken by her own department. It was not a film of sweeping emotions. It was a forensic examination of institutional decay and quiet fury. The camera work was unflinching, the pacing merciless. She was known for wrestling producers to the mat over details, the exact shade of grime on a uniform, the specific sound of a malfunctioning radio. She was perfect. Getting a meeting required leveraging every ounce of the new package's weight. Leo, the business agent, used the committed financing and the attached Croft name as a battering ram. Maya Thorne, skeptical of Hollywood stars and their vanity projects, agreed to a video call only after reading Silas Graff's script. Her face filled Alex's screen, sharp, intelligent eyes, hair pulled back severely, no makeup. The script is excellent, she said without greeting. But why me? And why him? She meant Julian. Because you don't direct action, you dissect pressure, Alex replied. The heist in the run isn't about the money. It's about the fracture in a marriage. The van is a pressure cooker. I need someone who can make the audience feel the screws tightening, not just watch the explosions. As for Julian Croft, he shared his screen, pulling up a sizzle reel, not of the charming old roles, but of the 5 months of leaked training footage. The brutal sparring, the exhausted holds, the focused, pained determination. This is who he is now. He is not here to be a movie star. He is here to be Mike, to be broken open on screen. You would have final cut on performance. Maya watched the reel, her expression unreadable. When it ended, she was silent for a full 30 seconds. You've rebuilt him, she stated. I've uncovered him, Alex corrected. The project is fully financed. Creative control is yours. Your job is to make a masterpiece of tension. Our job is to give you the tools and get out of the way. A faint, almost imperceptible spark of interest lit in her eyes. It was the offer every true director dreamed of and rarely received. Money, material, and freedom. Send me the full package, she said. If the paperwork matches the promise, I'm in. The call ended. Alex leaned back in the silent room. The fortress was built. The funding was secured from allies, not adversaries. The director was a razor, not a hammer. The manuscript was a weapon. All that remained was for Julian Croft to step onto the set and prove that the Kingmaker's most ambitious forge had not created a mere actor, but a truth. With the core triad locked in, Croft, Thorne, and Graff script, the rest of the casting became an exercise in deliberate alchemy. Alex gave Maya Thorne a simple directive: authenticity, not marquee value. We are building a world, not a poster. For the supporting roles, the other guards in the van, the heist crew members, the police detectives, Maya and the casting director dug into the trenches of character actors. They found faces etched with real life. A former security consultant who'd never acted, but whose 1,000-yard stare was perfect for the veteran driver. A stage actor who'd done time for a crime he didn't commit, bringing a palpable, simmering resentment to a key heist role. These were not washed-up actors, but unvarnished ones. Their collective anonymity heightened the film's claustrophobic realism. But the most audacious choice was for the wife, Sarah, the betrayer. It was Maya who proposed the radical approach. "We don't see her," she said to Alex in one of their sparse production calls. "Not fully. Not until the end. Her presence is a ghost in Mike's life. The betrayal works because we, the audience, have built her in our minds alongside him. We need an actress who can convey an entire marriage through posture, through the back of her head, through vocal tone alone." She chose Eleanor Shaw, not a household name, but a stage legend in her 60s, renowned for her voice, an instrument that could convey warmth, concern, and profound fatigue in a single sentence. She had retired from screen work years ago, disillusioned by its demands. Maya flew to meet her. She didn't bring a full script, just the kitchen scene. "I don't do cameos," Eleanor said, her famous voice like worn velvet. "It's not a cameo," Maya replied. "It's the central pillar of the film, and you will never face the camera." Intrigued against her will, Eleanor read the scene. Sarah, at the sink, her back to the camera, asking Mike if he remembered to take his heart medication. The dialogue was mundane. The subtext, a lifetime of care layered over a foundation of imminent betrayal, was volcanic. "You want me to act with my spine," Eleanor stated. "I want you to break a man's heart with your shoulder blades," Maya said. Eleanor Shaw took the role. On set, the creative atmosphere was one of intense, focused pressure. Maya Thorne was a quiet, exacting general. Every detail was militantly real. The money van was a decommissioned actual Brinks truck, its interior stripped and rebuilt for cameras. The cold rain during the heist sequence was relentless. Chilled water pumped through industrial systems for 12-hour nights. Julian Croft, his body hardened and his movie star persona buried deep, thrived in the austerity. He was Mike, a man of routine betrayed by the very heart of his routine. His performance was internal, a quiet implosion. And Eleanor Shaw was a phantom. In the dim morning light of the kitchen set, her silhouette at the sink, the slight slump of her shoulders as she asked, "You'll be careful today, won't you, Mike?" carried the weight of a 20-year marriage and its calculated end. In the bedroom, a sliver of her face obscured by a pillow, her request, "Can you turn out the light, love?" The switch is by your side, was both an intimate habit and a cruel manipulation, keeping him in the dark literally and figuratively. Her voice, filtered through the van's radio as Mike began his fateful route, was all concern. "Just come home safe to me." The crew watched these scenes in hushed awe. They weren't filming a thriller. They were conducting a forensic autopsy of a relationship, with the heist as the scalpel. Alex monitored the dailies from afar through encrypted feeds. He saw no trace of the golden boy. He saw only the emergence of something far more valuable, a credible, broken man. He saw Maya, Thorne's genius in the framing. The wife, always just out of sight, a haunting presence constructed by the audience's own complicity in Mike's blind trust. The final piece of the fortress was in place. The film was no longer a project. It was a ticking bomb of quiet tension, built with intrusion-free money, uncompromising talent, and a performance from Julian Croft that would forever shatter his old image. The Kingmaker's most complex forge was complete. All that remained was to light the fuse and show the world what he had built. Part 1 of the Kingmaker is now complete. The Kingmaker's rule is absolute. His clients are thriving. His wealth is immense. His anonymity was his shield. But the shield is cracking. A desperate actress is signing a contract with a ghost. A powerful senator is hunting a myth. And the one woman who saw through him from the start is walking into a building made of his oldest failure. The game is about to change. Subscribe to Novella Station now so you don't miss the explosive second half. Drop a comment below. Who do you think poses the biggest threat to the Kingmaker? Part 2. The Reckoning, coming soon. The legend ends. The man must survive.